All right, what is going on? Drive time, Friday afternoon. 11 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. Snowy, cold, chilly outside. As it is every day, it's going to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson behind the glass. Had a massive snowstorm hit the benches and the mountains last night. It's going to continue through today and tomorrow. And then looks like it's going to warm up Sunday and Monday before kind of a temperate, chilly, rainy Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. So there's your forecast. That's why you tuned into the show. I know that. Happy Friday to you. Congratulations. You made it. It is time for the weekend. Hopefully you have something fun planned, even though the weather is not going to be all that awesome unless you want to get up and shred the gnar, catch some pow, some freshies, some cheddar. All right, I'll stop. I have too many friends that are snow bros. I know all the dumb terminology they use. But if you're heading up to the resorts this weekend, enjoy. We got a lot to do on a jam-packed Friday edition of the radio show. The madness of March continues. We've got a lot of college basketball games currently going on. But a big night tonight in the Big 12. 5 o'clock Mountain Time on ESPN2 is where you're going to find BYU and Houston in the Big 12 championship semifinal. Houston, the number 1 seed, the number 2 team in the country. They're a 7.5-point favorite over Brigham Young tonight. BYU has won 9 straight games, 4 straight wins over ranked opponents. That's the longest winning streak BYU has had over ranked opponents since 1950. 6 quad 1 wins in that 9-game winning streak. So Kevin Young and his staff doing a great job. Those young men playing really well, and they are absolutely on fire. So we'll see what BYU can do tonight. Joe Lunardi has them as a 5 seed. A win tonight, I've got to imagine, would bump them up at least to a 4. And then if they're able to win the Big 12 championship, which is wild to say, but they're right in the mix, could BYU be a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament? The winner of BYU Houston will take on the winner of Arizona and Texas Tech. The other Big 12 championship semifinal, Arizona was able to get by Kansas. In a pretty good basketball game, Arizona was able to hold them off, and Texas Tech took care of Baylor. A game that didn't look great early, but ended up pretty close. So there's your other semifinal. Texas Tech taking on Arizona, 2 really, really good basketball teams. So we'll do some college basketball on the show today. We have one of the best college basketball guests in America on the show today to help you fill out your brackets. So we'll tell you who that is coming up in just a little bit. The Utah Jazz are back in action tonight. By the way, Texas Tech is a 2.5-point favorite to beat Arizona, so Vegas thinks it's going to be Texas Tech and Houston. Jazz welcome in the Toronto Raptors tonight, 7:30 Mountain Time. Tip at the Delta Center. The Jazz are playing the Raptors at the Delta Center. The Utah Hockey Club play their home games at the Delta Center, but they will not be at the Delta Center tonight because the Jazz are playing at the Delta Center. Utah Hockey Club is up in Seattle taking on the Kraken. And if you are into late-night college hoops, Utah State, Colorado State comes your way at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. I wish they were playing at the Delta Center, but they're not. That game will be on CBS Sports Network. Little soccer action on a Saturday sees the Utah Royals welcome in the Bay, and then RSL will be on the road taking on Houston. So a lot to get to on the program. Fun night of NBA basketball last night. I cannot fathom 4,000 three-point shots made. It's amazing. Stephen Wardell Curry continues to make history. So we'll get to some NBA, of course, on the show today as well. All right, good guest list on a Friday. Dave McMenamin, one of our celebrity reporters from ESPN, will bat leadoff today. And we'll do some NBA, we'll do some Jazz, we'll do some Lakers. The Lakers lost last night. Luka put up 45. LeBron did not play. And Milwaukee took care of them. LA has now lost 3 straight games. We'll do some Western Conference and some NCAA tournament with our guy Dave McMenamin. Chris Kamrani, Friday staple, not in studio because when it snows, Chris is a coward. Hope you're listening. So he's staying home today. Instead of joining us in studio, Paul Pugmire hosts our Saturday golf radio show and the Players' Championship going on right now down in Florida. So we're bringing Paul to talk a little golf. And then for those of you that have been asked over the past week to fill out a bracket, whether it's a family tournament, a friend tournament, a work tournament, or you got something online that said, hey, if you get this right, you can win $1 million. Well, chances are you don't watch a ton of college basketball, but if you want some help, Ken Pomeroy from KenPom.com will join us in the 4 o'clock hour. A nephew of mine once upon a time said, Uncle Spence, what is a Ken Palm? Because he kept hearing about Ken Palm being referenced during college basketball season. Well, Ken Palm is a Ken Pomeroy. He's one of the smartest college basketball minds around. So he stops by on a Friday. So Dave McMenamin, Chris Camerati, Paul Pugmire, Ken Pomeroy, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, on a Friday. And that guy, Porter Larson, who may or may not be going down to the Raptors Jazz game tonight at the Delta Center.
I'm going to be at the arena. It's called Delta Center.
It's called the Delta Center. I will have none of this.
But I'm looking forward to Delta Center festivities this afternoon, this evening.
Why are you brown-nosing over there? They do nothing for us. Well, we have no need to associate their dumb requests.
I do like to kind of enunciate it because it doesn't sound well in a sentence. So it just, it kind of, to your point, the Delta Center should be rocking tonight. And
there you go.
Much of the spring, as the Utah Hockey Club is within a couple points of maybe some wild card action. We'll cover that as it goes. Speaking of brackets, ESPN 700 $1 million bracket. Make sure you get yours in once Selection Sunday gets going. And excited for a good show. And Chris Camerati. There's not even any snow on the ground.
Disappointed whenever it's
there's some falling, but
if it's like less than 50 degrees, he just won't leave his house.
I know.
It's disappointing. We like having our guy in studio.
My Friday is lesser because he's not here with us.
Well said. But we'll do our best to get by, and we'll bring CK in over the phone today on a Friday. All right, our first guest right out of the gates will be Dave McMenamin to talk a little NBA, some Jazz, some Lakers, some Western Conference playoffs. But before we get to Dave, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too at Prize Picks on a Friday afternoon. It's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Shout out to our good friends at Prize Picks, great partner on the show. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, and you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's very easy. We'll use the Jazz-Raptors games tonight. Now, don't hold me to this because you never know who's going to play. But, for instance, it's something like Lauri Markkanen, more or less than 20.5 points. R.J. Barrett, more or less than 6.5 rebounds. It's really easy. And then if you get those 2 projections right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. But the bottom line is they're giving away free money, so you might as well go grab it and see if you like it. So here's what you do. Download the Prize Picks app today. It's free. And then use the promo code ESPN700. When you make your first $5 bet, you're going to be rewarded with $50 right away. Don't even have to win that $5 bet to get to 50. It is guaranteed with our good friends at Prize Picks. Run your game all season long. All right, it is the madness of March, and we've got a couple of interesting local storylines. First of all, from the University of Utah side of things, the college basketball crown apparently is still being discussed. It is a new tournament, and I have no idea who would even be in it. We've debated it, whether or not, Utah should even take this invite. From a player standpoint, you just want to play. I mean, that's the thing. If any of you ever played, beyond junior jazz or church ball, you remember the first fall where basketball wasn't part of your life and you realized you had to find something else to do. You want to play as much as you can. And if you're a fringe pro like Gabe, right, Gabe Madsen, who really needs better tape than what we saw all year long, because Gabe is a dynamite outside shooter but couldn't really find it consistently this year for a number of different reasons. A guy like Lawson Lovering, who's got good size and probably could make some money overseas playing in Europe or something like that. You want more tape. And you want more opportunities to show scouts that you can play. From a coaching standpoint, does Josh Eilert really have the stomach to keep doing this? Now, it's your job, and coaching jobs are hard to find, and there have been some conversation about potentially Alex Jensen keeping Coach Eilert on staff. Coach Eilert is a guy who played in the Big 12, coached for 17 years in the Big 12, and spent a couple years here, so he knows the tone and kind of the biorhythms of the conference. So does Alex want to keep him around? Does that make sense? I have no idea. We're still waiting to hear, official news on Alex Jensen filling out his bench. Sean O'Connell was able to catch up with Andre Miller today, but obviously sensitivities with conversations going on. That's not anything they discussed. So we'll see. That's kind of the deal right now with Utah Hoops. We're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what the coaching staff looks like and waiting to see if they're going to elect to play a little postseason basketball in something called the College Basketball Crown. BYU, on the other hand, they look to continue their hot streak tonight, taking on Houston in the Big 12 tournament semifinal. Now, BYU has won 9 straight basketball games, and during that streak, they have 4 wins over ranked opponents. That is the longest winning streak BYU has had against ranked opponents since 1950. They have 6 quad 1 wins during that 9-game streak. They boat race Kansas in Provo. They beat Arizona in McHale. And they beat Iowa State twice, once on the road and the other, quote, neutral court environment in Kansas City. So tonight against Houston, they run up against a buzzsaw. They run up against a team that has a chance to win the national championship, in my opinion. They run up against a team that has been the class of the Big 12 for a few years and is going back potentially as a number 1 seed, even if they lose tonight. Now, it's interesting to kind of understand exactly how Kelvin Sampson and Houston want to play. I think they're 361st in the country in pace. They slow it down. They do not like to get out and run. They want to make this a backyard brawl, and they've got the dudes to do it. If you've watched Houston at all this year, when Utah played Houston earlier this season, a long, long time ago, the final score was a cool 70-36, and honestly, it wasn't that close. There was one point where Utah had, I think, 3 made field goals and 7 turnovers. And Houston, when they lock in defensively and when they're healthy with all of the personnel that Kelvin Sampson wants to play, they're among the best defensive teams in all of college basketball, and they're big and they're physical and they're fast and they make you earn it. BYU, on the other hand, is like a top 50 defensive team, thereabouts, which isn't bad. It's not bad. But BYU's bread and butter is their nuance offensively. What they're able to do on a myriad of different levels in a myriad of different ways to beat you depending on what the night needs. All the attention is on their three-point shooting because they made 18 the other night, which is a Big 12 record. But BYU has had plenty of games against good teams, including Iowa State in their building, where the three-point shot wasn't falling. And they just figured out another way to do it, namely get Fus Traore involved on the pivot down low because his footwork and ability to finish with both hands makes him impossible to stop one-on-one. You got to bring another defender to him, and then maybe that can open up the perimeter. Then guys like Richie and Trevin Nell and Dawson Baker and Dallin Hall. Even the Mad Kid has been knocking down threes, and the Boscovich kid has played a lot better as well. Trey Stewart, a little bit of a late-season revelation, more of a defensive stopper, but he knocked down a couple of threes the other night in addition. The question for me is this. How quickly will Kevin Young pull the plug if Yegor Demin cannot handle the pressure that Houston is going to bring them? Now, Demin obviously is the starting point guard. He's the orchestrator. He's the pro prospect. He's probably going to be a lottery pick in this year's draft. But there have been a lot of games where he has not been prepared for the strength and the physicality of the opponent. And Kevin has gone to Dallin Hall rather quickly. Now, Dallin has Big 12 experience. This is his second year in the conference. He is a tough-as-nails, gritty kid. He is not going to be rattled. And while I understand why pro scouts love Yegor Demin, and there's a lot to love, namely the measurables, the skill set, the passing ability, strictly from a toughness, let's not get rattled standpoint, there are times where I think BYU's better off having Dallin Hall run this offense. So, look, Houston is a 7.5-point favorite. This is a team that has a chance to win the national championship. They're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in America. But BYU has that thing that this time of year is real and you need, and that's called momentum. Momentum leads to confidence, and right now I'm sure BYU thinks they can play with anybody because they've shown it. And Richie Saunders was named the Big 12 Most Improved Player of the Year, and he is playing himself into consideration for the Big 12 Player of the Year. Obviously didn't go to him, but first team all Big 12 and BYU with tremendous depth in a way that I don't think they've had probably since, even that Fredette team. The Jimmer team was pretty top-heavy with Jimmer, Brandon Davies, Jackson Emery. They had some decent bit pieces. This is as deep of a BYU team, quite frankly, as I've ever seen, if I'm honest. So we'll see what it brings tonight as BYU's taking on Houston. Utah State, for those of you that are into some late-night, Friday night hoops, 10 o'clock Mountain Time, CBS Sports Network, they're taking on Colorado State. They will know the potential opponent in the final prior to their game. So we'll see how that goes down. But a fun day of college basketball. We got Texas and Tennessee going on right now in the SEC tournament. And then we got some pro hoops tonight as well. Speaking of pro hoops, we'll catch a break. 4,000 three-point shots for Stephen Wardell Curry. How does Dave McMenamin put that into context? Latest on the Western Conference playoff race. Do a little jazz, too, as Dave stops by. Coming up on the other side, then it's Chris Comrani, Paul Pugmire, and Ken Pomeroy off and running on a Friday. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. You know, it's part of the bit for Dave. So as long as we have this radio show and as long as he joins us, we have to play the curb bumper coming in. But it kind of hurts my heart a little bit. Kind of makes me sad that we're not going to have any more new Curb Your Enthusiasm episodes. But Dave McMiniman, how often will you because you travel a lot, which means you're on planes, most likely private jets and charters because you're a celebrity reporter in five-star hotels. Will you ever just crack open a random curb if you're just traveling or on a plane or in a hotel?
Absolutely. I fly a lot of Delta. There you go. Local tie-in to the arena where you guys have the show. But they have curb episodes that rotate. Usually they'll have like half of a season. And so I'll pick off one of them every once in a while. I also follow like several Instagram accounts just dedicated to curb clips. So I'm taking it in any way I can get it.
Since you brought it up, Dave, just out of curiosity, what's the name of the arena where the Jazz play basketball?
Is it the Delta Center?
Nailed it. Nailed it, Dave. Nailed it, Dave. So the reason I bring it up is it's called the Delta Center, but they're trying to do this dumb thing where they're sending out emails saying, please say Delta Center, not the Delta Center, which is someone over there must be really bored because it's really dumb.
That's ridiculous. That's amazing, though. That's a curb topic. I feel like, we got a germ of an idea here.
You know what? It actually is.
Well, okay, the big dance at the end of the year when you were in high school, when you dressed up and asked the date, what did you call it?
You know what? This is a good call because I certainly called it prom. I don't think I ever said the prom.
Interesting. So my high school, we would say the prom.
Huh.
But I got to know people who would just say prom. And I was like, well, it is the prom.
Huh. Who did you take to prom your senior year, Dave?
Becca Browngold. Funny enough, I was covering a playoff game last year in Minnesota. I got a tap on the shoulder, and it's Becca Browngold. I had not seen her in, 20 years. Married with kids and happy and all that. Was visiting her in-laws' family in Minneapolis.
Okay, follow-up question here. Let's get weird on a Friday. Based off your current circumstance, are there any exes where you just look at them and you're like, yep, I win, just out of curiosity?
Fair question, I think, to anyone who gets betrothed. No, I don't really live life that way. So, no.
You're a bigger man than I am because that's like I'd be sending out invites to exes just to spite them if I was you, Dave. So you're a bigger man than I am.
Is that hard to do? That's the question here, Spence.
No, it's not. I'm just saying. But let me just wrap this up by saying congratulations because I think you've done very well for yourself.
I agree. Thank you.
All right, Dave, over to basketball now. Luka drops 45, no LeBron. They've lost 3 straight. Any concern, or is this like they're still getting used to each other? LeBron's not playing, but after that run, the Lakers have lost 3 straight games. Where are we at?
There's a little bit of concern just because the West is so packed. The 3 teams below them are all surging right now. Houston's found stuff once again. They went through their doldrums, and they're starting to level out. Golden State is as hot as any other team in the league right now. I think they've won 11 straight games when Jimmy is in the lineup. And Minnesota is figuring stuff out, too. So those are the teams they're trying to stave off. And this is just the start of this terrible stretch of the schedule for the Lakers. Last night, they get blown out to Milwaukee. That is day 1 of 8 days where they play 6 games. And they're going to play tonight with no Luka. There's Dorian Finney-Smith is doubtful. Gabe Vincent's doubtful. 2 important role players who become even more important when there's no LeBron, no Jackson Hayes, no Rui Hachimura. And they get back. They'll get back in the middle of the night, have Saturday off, and then Sunday's an early tip. It's like a 12:30 local game against the Suns, and the Suns are actually playing a little bit better than they had for some stretches of the season. So this thing is tough here. It's not like doom and gloom, like okay, this thing's going off the rails. It is. They did so much work from late January until really late February, early March, and now this 2-week stretch could kind of nullify all that work. And rather than them going into the playoffs talking about, hey, maybe we can be, second or third in the West, you're back into the conversation of fifth or sixth and trying like hell to avoid the play-in tournament.
I mean, look, and this is just me talking. Ultimately, I don't know that anything extra special for them is possible this year. If you're going to tell me your starting centers are Jackson Hayes and Alex Len, and Rui does some really good things, but there are just too many, namely Jokic, right? I just don't know what's reasonable, Dave, to expect from the Lakers this year, even if Luka and LeBron are fully healthy. And look, those two are both cheat codes individually, and together I am excited to see what it could look like eventually when they're really clicking. But let's just assume that they're able to get healthy. Let's assume that they're able to stay afloat and they, essentially get a top 3 or 4 seed. What's a realistic Dave McMenamin expectation for this iteration as opposed to what they've been able to do, which is reset their organization for 15 years with Luka moving forward?
I think it'd be all matchup dependent. I agree with you on Denver and Jokic. It's not just the bigs, but the history there. The Nuggets players have a ton of confidence going up against the Lakers. Yes, the Lakers had a very impressive win in Denver about 3 weeks ago when J.J. Redick had a smart game plan where they were basically fronting Jokic in the post and then had a backside defender sandwiching him if they were able to get the lob pass into him, the entry pass, I should say. But that's a very specific one-game scenario, and if that came up in a playoff series, there would be time for Mike Malone to come up with counters. That team, I think, would cause the Lakers a ton of problems. And OKC, I think there's a ton of parity in the league this year, but there are 3 teams in their own tier in Cleveland, Boston, and OKC. So I think both those teams, wherever the Lakers caught them, if they did catch them, would be a problem. But if they could avoid them somehow, just the way the bracket broke, or maybe only to play one of them in the conference finals, I mean, I could see them in the conference finals or the finals. I wouldn't pick them to beat Denver or OKC, but say you get to the conference finals, you have to play OKC, and again, it's like a cliche, but you're one turned ankle from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander away from having a pathway to be in the NBA Finals.
I do have a couple of OKC thoughts, but before we get there, you referenced the Warriors winning their last 11 with Jimmy in the lineup. But before we get to that, occasionally there's an accomplishment that even for somebody like me who's spent a life around pro sports and 20 years on this side of things, covering and witnessing certain situations, that just makes me stop on my tracks and I go, you've got to be kidding me. For a number of years, John Stockton held the Utah Jazz all-time three-point record with 845 made threes. Joe Ingles now holds the record. I think it's 1,070. Dave, how do you put 4,000 three-point shots made into context? Like, I can't wrap my mind around it.
It's wild because, when he set the record or passed Ray Allen for the record, and, obviously that was held by Reggie Miller for so many years, it was, just under 3,000. And so he's obliterated that record. He's not, on the whole 18 of his career, but he's certainly on the back 9, but there's still time to add to that record. It's just incredible. He completely owns that category, and he has the anecdotal title of the best shooter of all time, but he has the statistical title to back it up. And he's still doing it at an age where he's setting the record, not on one leg, not on a team that's not contending. I think the parallel between him and LeBron getting the 50,000 combined points also this year, while they are still playing a version of their prime. Okay, they are not in their prime, but if you squint your eyes a little bit, you could say, oh, that looks similar to a guy that I saw dominating the league 10 years ago. It's a testament to his professionalism, his insane talent, the stability that organization has put around him, and he is still a guy that if you're a fan of Salt Lake City on, a random couple nights of the season when Golden State comes to town, and I know the Jazz are going through their own kind of rebuild process that's been a little prolonged, more than I think most people's liking would be. You still will go down to Delta Center, not the Delta Center, to go check out Stephen Curry.
It's the Delta Center. It is the Delta Center, okay? I'm not getting off it. Send me all the emails you want. It's always been the Delta Center. Just because you don't have enough to do and you got to make stuff up for your job doesn't mean I have to change the way I talk, okay? Moving on. All right, let's stick with Golden State, away from just the Steph absurdity of 4,000 threes. 11 straight with Jimmy. And look, they do look different, and he has helped. And he knew that he would, because when he's engaged, he's awesome, even at this age. But I'll kind of ask you the same question about the Warriors that I asked about the Lakers. What's best case scenario based off some of the same? They actually have some of the same deficiencies the Lakers have with bigs, but I guess they can supplement a little bit if they want to go that lineup with Draymond at the 5. But what best case Golden State this year after the Butler stuff is kind of manifested? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there is a parallel there beyond just the continued excellence of their top dogs. Listen, they just got Kuminga back, who played pretty well against Sacramento for a guy who hasn't played in a while. Gary Payton II looks like the guy in fits and starts that was part of the championship team that beat the Celtics, and he'd really not been that for them. So they have some wing defenders, and then you have the kind of the shared belief factor of Jimmy and Steph and Draymond. Obviously, a very good head coach in Steve Kerr. At the same time, though, like some of the wins that they've gotten during this streak, they beat Charlotte twice. There's a Brooklyn win in there, Portland, Sacramento twice. So they are winning games they're supposed to win, and that's not a given in this league. So I'm not trying to take away from the momentum they've been building, because all you can do is play the games that are in front of you. But I want to see them. They got Denver coming up next week. I want to see them against Denver. I want to see them. I think they have OKC. Maybe they have two more against Denver. So they have two more against Denver. They got another one against the Lakers. Let's see them in those matchups before we start anointing them as another team with an outside shot at making the NBA Finals.
All right, moving over to Oklahoma City now, and I have heard you on this show say something oftentimes, and I'm the very same way. Whenever, first of all, trying to predict anything is an exercise in futility. There are a lot of people out there that profess to be experts, but all they do is flex when they get it right and don't mention it when they get it wrong. But ultimately,
we should talk about Bontemps when he's not here. Come on.
Wow, that was excellent. Porter, please clip that. We're sending that to Timmy Goodtime Bontemps. But, look, ultimately, I like to call it educated guesses. This is the time of year that my aunts will ask me to fill out their bracket. I'm like, you're going to be highly disappointed because this is impossible. But like you, when I try to predict this stuff, I tend to go with the team that I've seen do it before, right? And Oklahoma City did make the postseason a year ago. They smoked the Pelicans, and then they lost to the Mavs. They do not have one of those, like even the Warriors at one point, I think, made the Western Conference Finals before they broke through with their dynasty. Oklahoma City does not have that one playoff run where they were close, and then it didn't work out. Now, look, every single number doesn't just indicate they're good. It indicates they're somewhat historic, quite frankly, if you dig into the net and the difference and all that stuff. And every time I watch them, I walk away more and more impressed, oftentimes even when they lose. They're the Vegas favorite to come out of the West, and they should be. But does it give you any pause? Not just their youth. I'm not talking about the youth. I'm talking about the lack of, hardened playoff experience to indicate that, yes, they're one more year from actually doing what most people think they can do this year.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. And guess what? If I'm late to the party, then so be it. But I have watched enough of this league over the years that there's a very real trend that the idea of a team taking its lumps, not just its lump, plural, along its path to finding its ultimate ceiling. It's part of the maturation process, and it could be that this team is that special. Like I'm not going to put them in a dynastic kind of category or anything like that, but just they have enough players enough of their core that have been there together. You add in Hartenstein and Caruso, high-level defensive role players, Caruso with championship experience, of course. Jalen and Shea and Chet have all gone up a level since last year. So they have that inertia in that locker room. Daigneault, it annoyed me, his substitution little fiasco the other night. I don't know if you caught that, but he was trying to break up the Denver fast breaks because he thought Jokic kind of inbounds the pass too quick before his team has a chance to set their defense, that he would have a standing sub at half court, so the refs would have to check with him to see if he wanted to put the sub in before they'd hand the ball to Jokic. So he gained a little, a couple seconds through gamesmanship, and eventually, the refs called him for delay a game, and I think he ended up getting a technical. But I was like, okay, Daigneault, like if you're going to go deep in your bag with like little tricks like that, maybe you are just a late 30s guy who doesn't really have the experience. If you are that devious about your coaching strategy, maybe you'll be able to match wits with whomever you go up against in the Western Conference playoffs. But I still want to see it. I still think them versus Denver, and they had that epic 2-game set earlier this week, and they split. And Denver's won a championship, and they haven't. And so, like, until Jokic, and guess what? I'm probably going to vote for Shea if the season ended today. But Jokic's still a better player, and a lot of times the better player in a series wins the series. So again, I'm with you. I think let's see them do it in the playoffs, and we'll celebrate them when they do. But I'm not going to necessarily say they're going to waltz through it before it happens.
Do you feel the same way about the Cavs? Or are we getting to the – look, all they do is win. And I'll tell you, the eye-opening moment for me was a few weeks back at TD Garden when Cleveland rolled back. They came back and they steamrolled Boston. Donovan was so good in that game, and he's been so good for them all year. They add DeAndre Hunter, and all they do is win. And, yes, in the playoffs, it's can you beat that team 4 times in 7 tries? Are you inching closer and closer to saying that Boston has a real problem in Cleveland?
I like this Cavs team a lot, and I think they have a little bit more seasoning. You think about, like, they lost to the Knicks a couple years ago, and then they were able to advance another round last year to get through a Game 7, and they lose to the eventual champs. And in that series against the Celtics, I know it wasn't particularly close, but they had injuries, and I think Donovan missed 2 full games or a game and a half of it. They've gotten better. I think they have a better coach than they had last year. Not to say that JB Bickerstaff isn't doing a good job with the Pistons, because he absolutely is. Just Kenny has gotten another level with this group. I like them a lot. I think it might just come down to like, can Mobley be the guy that helped win that game in Boston a couple weeks ago with 11 points in the fourth quarter. If he's going to unlock and be that guy on both ends, like, they are going to be a real problem. And especially with, I know it's a viral thing right now with Kristaps being out, but, he obviously missed a lot of time last year too. There's been injuries that's happened to him. When you're that big, there's more of your body to get hurt. And Al Horford is incredible, but Al Horford is 95 years old. And, like, that could be a matchup that they win. And then, they obviously don't have the size in their backcourt that Boston does, but they certainly have the skill. And then they're way deeper. The Celtics have maybe the 6th man of the year, but beyond that, there's not a lot going on that bench. The Cavs can play. I mean, the Cavs are going to have a real kind of problem for Kenny Atkinson, try to figure out how I can cut 11 or 12 guys down to 9 in the playoffs. Boston, you're barely, you go 7 or 8 guys, and you're talking about real minutes for Sam Hauser in a playoff.
Dave, I know you got to run because you got TV. So what's the deal? Is it makeup? You got to put your face on? What's the next step before you go on TV?
I do it all, man. I one-man band in it today, so I got to get down to the arena and make sure they let me in for this hit, and then cover this wonderful basketball game that has about 7.5 guys in uniform for the Lakers tonight. All
right, brother. Well, I appreciate your time. Have a great weekend. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Spence.
Dave McMenamin covers the NBA. He's kind of their Laker guy over at ESPN, but does a really, really good job kind of from a big picture standpoint. And for all you single guys out there, Dave McMenamin gives you hope. If you're discouraged right now, okay, if you're out there, if you're grinding, if you're showing up for work every day, if you're trying to work out to get in better shape, if you look in the mirror and you don't feel great about yourself, just think about Dave McMenamin. Because Dave McMenamin should give us all hope, Porter. If you run out of hope, in fact, my motto for my listeners this weekend is if you feel like you're out of hope, if you feel like you've tried everything and there's nothing left, be more like Dave McMenamin.
Dave goes and just walks on at Syracuse, does his thing, right? He shoots his shot, I think is the lesson with Dave McMenamin. He shoots his shot.
If you don't know what I'm referring to, Dave McMenamin, who kind of looks like a Keebler elf, married Malika Andrews. And Dave's my guy. Dave's a sweet guy. That's my guy. Love Dave.
He's the man.
But when you look at the couple, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, did you two go to BYU and did the man tell the woman that they met in the pre-existence and fooled her into marrying him because of the eternal stuff? Like that, it reeks of the religiosity God says we're supposed to be together. I have no idea how I pulled it off, quite frankly.
He's the man.
But be more like Dave McMenamin is the call today. All right, BYU looks like they're going to get another stroke of very good luck. According to Joseph Duarte, he's reporting that Juwan Roberts is not going to play tonight against BYU. Who is Juwan Roberts, you ask? Well, Juwan Roberts is Houston's best big by far. He's about 6'9", 240. Kelvin Sampson has excellent guard play, and L.J. Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp. So Joseph Tugler, Javier Francis, looks like those are the two that will get more minutes. But Juwan Roberts is a beast down low. He would have been the main guy who would have guarded like Foose if he came off the bench. He's played in 31 games. We're talking about 11 points, about 6 boards. Shoots it well. He shoots it a high percentage from the floor because he usually dunks on your head. Doesn't shoot it from the outside, but everybody else does. That's a big loss for the Houston Cougars. I wonder how that's going to affect the line. So BYU fortunate to run up against Iowa State. They were without 2 of their 3 best players. Now Houston will take on BYU tonight without their best big. He's a big piece of what Kelvin Sampson likes to do. All right, special thanks to the man himself. Again, if you're running into a rough weekend, if you feel like you're out of hope, be more like Dave McMenamin. Special thanks to Dave. For the time today, we're going to bring in Chris Camarati coming up on the other side, our Friday staple. It's the Players' Championship down in Florida, TPC Sawgrass. Paul Pugmire will stop by to talk some golf. And then we'll get you ready to fill out your brackets and do some local and national college basketball with the great Ken Pomeroy. It's a drive on a Friday. It's good to have you with us. Keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Is this Kenny Rogers?
Hell yeah.
The only reason I know that, does he sing The Gambler?
He does. He does.
And also, little known fact.
Lucille, a few others.
Little known Big Dave fact. My pops loves the Kenny Rogers Christmas album. I have no idea why. I grew up listening to the Kenny Rogers Christmas album way too much.
Because it's awesome. I'm not a Christmas music guy.
Awesome is overstating the Kenny Rogers Christmas album.
Depends who you ask.
Let's ask Chris Comrani. I didn't strike you as a Kenny Rogers fan. What's the deal on a Friday?
There was some fighting words during the opening tip.
Say again. Sorry, say again. We didn't have you potted up. Say again.
I heard that there was some fighting words during opening tip. Something about me being a coward. So I thought that it would be on point to roll with the theme that apparently is part of. I guess, I mean, you're not wrong. It's 35 degrees. It's cold. What else am I going to do? But Kenny Rogers is good, man. Big Dave has good taste.
Did I use the term coward to describe?
You did.
Oh, man.
It's okay.
Indeed.
Well, okay, well, that was too much. I apologize. I was just saying.
Coward of the County, though. It's a great song.
Okay.
It's kind of fitting for me at this time of year. Just not really willing to budge when it comes to what I feel like doing or don't feel like doing, but we're almost there, man. I believe staunchly that we're almost there.
I must be grumpy today because I said Dave McMenamin looks like a Keebler elf, too.
You're being mean to all our guests.
This is the day after Josh Grant.
Are you going to be mean to Paul Pugmire?
You can't be mean to Paul Pugmire.
That's what I'm asking.
Josh Grant yesterday on the show told me that I was way too nice.
So you're overcorrecting.
Yeah, CK. What are you? Josh Grant rolls on the show yesterday and accuses me of being way too nice and says I'm too nice all the time to a fault.
On air or in life?
You don't have
both?
to do that. Only on air, okay? Only on air.
I don't think, I listened to the Bill Burr interview with Terry Gross on Fresh Air this week, and it got somewhat he was pretty demonstrative, as he's known to do and known to be, and it was engaging and it was fun because for once people were having an honest conversation. I don't think you necessarily need to be the type of host that pokes the bear and goes for, the hyperbolic ESPN screaming at the universe type stuff. But I think you toe the line pretty well, man.
That's kind of you. And you should know that both Porter and I were just sad that you didn't, honor us with your presence on a Friday. So I apologize for the name, but we were mostly just sad you're not here.
Well, I mean, name calling is normal in society now, and it goes all the way up to the very highest ranks. I was taught when I was a kid that you're not supposed to call people names, but you're my close friend, so you can call me whatever you want, on or off air. Also, I don't know if you got Duke in. I don't know if we wanted to bring Leo in. Leo and Duke, live radio. Don't know if that necessarily blends with the type of audio that listeners of The Drive want to deal with on a Friday. So we'll just have to resort from a remote hit from home.
Fair enough. Duke is in the house. The station mascot is in the house. Would have loved to see Leo. I still haven't met the young lad. Maybe at some point we'll do that. Let me ask you this, Chris, now that we've wasted 5 minutes, because that's what we do. Do you have friends or family or relatives that just believe that because you work in sports, you need to fill out their bracket? This time of year, do you get people asking you for advice?
The only one who does is the most important one, and it's my wife. Every single year, she sent me actually a text yesterday saying that there is a prize amongst the teachers at her elementary school this year, and I would love you to guess what the prize is for the person that finishes with the best, most accurate bracket at the end of March Madness.
Is this going to make me depressed to the state of how we treat teachers in America?
It will.
A free packet of erasers and pencils.
No. Somehow even worse. A 15-minute break.
Stop it. Oh. That's the first place prize at Amanda's school is if you win it, you get to take 15 minutes off of your class.
15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
So that being said, I have a lot of riding on my shoulders this year, man. You know that nobody grinds college hoop like me, so I'm gonna have to be very judicious when it comes to picking my teams that are going to make a deep run. I'm always obsessed with, a 13 seed making a run that I always get wrong. So I don't know if we're going to necessarily have one of those this year, but there's a lot riding on my shoulders, no doubt.
Goodness gracious. Your wife seems like such a pleasant person. Is that fair to say? A very happy, pleasant, kind person?
Yes. I mean, probably among the most happy and pleasant people that I know. You would imagine that if she wasn't, her and I would not work out very well because the yin, the yang, I believe there needs to be a balance for some people, especially for folks like me. So yes, you are right in that scouting report. But I mean, listen, she's the only one that really asked me. My buddies who I grew up with still are holding on to the dying embers of a bracket pool that we're down to like 5 guys, sometimes 4, and nobody even really watches college basketball, obviously, as much as we used to. We're all old, we have kids. So sometimes you'll get, somebody that's going to pick like a 10 seed to win it all. And it's still fun, but I like to remind people that nobody cares how your bracket's doing in public. You can talk about it privately, but nobody cares about how many picks you got right or wrong. Nobody does.
It's the same thing as your fantasy team. Nobody gives a rip, so don't talk about it in public. Because I can remember at one point, maybe this was during COVID when nothing was real. Didn't Amanda hop on the show? I had you on. And,
she did.
Right?
Yeah.
And didn't I make you give her the phone? Am I remember? I saw that? Okay.
I think you did. Yeah. I mean, that was back when, like you said, nothing was real. It was the time of year that you could like be outside, even though everything wasn't real. We didn't have a kid yet, so you could enjoy anything. Not saying you can't enjoy things, but you know what I mean. And your listeners who have been there like you and I know what I mean. So yeah, but we're 10 minutes in and we haven't even talked a lick about sports. And I love it.
Yeah, we'll get there at some point. I did this exercise with some friends of mine not too long ago. We had everybody send to the thread your most COVID picture, right? The most COVID picture. And I can't even tell you what I look like. It's hard to describe. I look like a hardened criminal. It's like a Charles Manson type look, super long hair. I didn't realize that my beard was as loose as it was. But long story short, I had to renew my driver's license during COVID, which, by the way, hours in line. And my license picture, I've got to show you my license picture next time we're together. It doesn't look anything like me. It is wild.
Trying to think what mine would be. I didn't change that much. I mean, I guess I kind of got bored and like dyed my hair and got a little more extreme. But there's a picture that comes to mind of hiking Mount Olympus with Trav, Aaron Falk, and Bill Orm while Bill was in town for a day. We hiked Mount Olympus in the summer of 2020, and Trav had this amazing, huge beard. He had like a Nate Bench bull hat, and that's the one look and like thought that I always go back to because everybody went there separately. Obviously we were together, but we were outside. It was a very interesting time. So that's if I had to pick one, and I'll send it to you. It's amazing. It's that.
Yes, please do. And I'll send you mine. And you're going to be horrified at what you see when I send this to you. I actually just found it. So I'm sending it to you right now. Hey, while we're in this nonsensical space on a Friday, because, hey, it's Friday. This week, I think it was Wednesday, was the 5-year anniversary of the Jazz in OKC when Gobert tested positive. And then the game was canceled. Hour later, we get the Woj bomb. The season has been canceled. I wonder what your memories are of that night. Now, for me, because, of course, I asked you so I could tell you my thing, I was finishing up the show, and I had a hit on Talking Sports, our guy Dave Fox. I finished up the show. I said to my producer, okay, I'm just walking across the street. I'm going to go do this KUTV thing. And right before I walked into the building, I get the alert. Gobert test positive, Jazz OKC postponed. This was before the whole thing was canceled. And I called Dave. I'm like, hey, what do you want to do? He's like, well, you still got to come in so we can fill the time. And we put on our best Joe Rogan amateur epidemiologist hats and tried to walk people through what was going on. In my mind, I'm like, is Rudy going to die? I mean, we didn't know anything yet about the entire situation. And then an hour later, you get the text and the alert from Woj that the season is no longer. Where were you that night? What are your memories of that 5 years ago?
In honor of the great Lester Bangs, I'm home. I'm always home. So, like, I was where I was right now, watching on TV. I was texting Tony. I was texting Andy. Um, I just remember it being crazy because, like, an hour or two after the game got called off, Andy was on CNN. Like they just got him on talking about it because like everything had stopped. And I was just like, oh, there's Andy, and he's on CNN to talk about, how they're going to get home and all these requirements that they had to go to, the rigorous testing and so on and so forth. So that's always going to be my memory is Andy on CNN and texting Tony and Andy and just like seeing if they're okay and seeing how they were going to get home.
Best Lester Bangs quote? Let's see. You made friends with them. Friendship is the booze they feed you. They want you to get drunk on feeling like you belong. Potentially, that's got to be in the mix.
Yeah, I like more random ones. Like, give me 1,000 words on Black Sabbath. Like that. That's like classic, nerdy editor talk, which really pulls at my heartstrings. But yes, there is a bevy of them, and that one that you mentioned is probably at the top.
You'll meet them all again on their long road to the middle. Am I remember that one?
Yes, correct.
Oh, that one's so good. What a great movie. Philip Seymour Hoffman, rest in peace. What a loss, huh?
Yeah, man. I mean, I watched The Birdcage recently, which is one of my favorite movies. Two of the three out of the main people in that movie are now gone. Obviously, the GOAT, Robin Williams, left way too early. Gene Hackman. If we'd all be lucky to get to 95, man. So like I would I would wish that for everybody that I care about. So yeah, man, that's where we are right now.
My son was doing an informal poll, and he texted all of us to send in our top 10 actors of all time. And I think I had Hoffman at 3, and he was blown away. He didn't really, because he's a young. I don't know that he's familiar. I definitely force fed him Almost Famous, probably too young. I don't think he's ever seen Boogie Nights or Lebowski. When you look at the body of work of Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think perennially underrated as far as just a great actor with range. That's my take on a Friday, CK.
Sandy Lyle, one of the best Robins to a Batman in any movie history. The Make It Rain montage in Along Came Polly. My colleague Doug Haller actually wrote a story about that last year, like just about how Philip Seymour Hoffman basically ad-libbed so much of that pickup basketball game in New York and just the Make It Rain and all that silly stuff. So, yeah, I mean, probably Almost Famous, probably Boogie Nights, Talented Mr. Ripley. But Sandy, when he's at the end of Along Came Polly, when he's pretending to be Reuben Pfeffer and he's in that boardroom and he just fake coughs the entire time to try to get through the fake presentation. I feel like that's what I would do if I was really hard pressed into something that I didn't know I could pull off. I would just, basically try to mask it with a fake cough for a good 15 minutes.
Charlie Wilson's War, underrated. Falk was in the bubble, right? Did you?
He was.
Were you were you communicating with him during that time? Because I can remember him sending out some social posts of like the food that they were feeding them down. It was Orlando, right? Bubbles in Orlando.
Yeah. I mean, it was at your place, man. It was Disney World.
Why is that my place? Because I happened to be in Orlando last week.
So somebody went there recently, and it wasn't me.
Well, I crushed the Toy Story ride.
You have to.
I beat my brother.
Listen, it took me like 5 or 6 times to beat Amanda. Like, she's so good at that, and I don't get jealous or like competitive all that often. But after like the 3rd loss, I was like, I can't do this again. And it took me a while. So I'm glad you won.
Okay, but it's like an hour wait to get on that ride. You guys got back in line like 4 straight times so you could beat her in the shooting game?
I think this was back when you could get those fast passes. So we would always just get a front of the line bump for that because the line was so long. And I was weirdly, like I said, I'm not competitive really about anything in life, but she was just taking me to school every single time. And I was like, come on, man, have a little self-respect.
It's not that hard.
Okay.
No. Like there are cheats, like the Bo Peep level. If you shoot the lambs that are coming out of the top of the barn, you get an extra 1,000 points for each lamb you shoot.
The poor lambs. They're screaming.
BYU's playing Houston tonight. Chris, let's transit. Does March Madness move the needle for you at all? I mean, we've already gone over, because this is the time of year. I already have 3 requests to fill out brackets, and no matter how many times I explain to them, it doesn't matter how much you watch. This is impossible. I still get the same requests every single year. I am of the opinion that this is the best individual sporting event that we have on our calendar every year. I love it. I geek out on it. It's the only reason college basketball still generates revenue. Does March Madness move the needle for you at all personally?
I will say Thursday through Sunday, the first weekend does. And then after that, I'm kind of like tapping out because I don't necessarily need to see Duke play Tennessee in the Sweet 16. I mean, maybe I do this year because got to crush the Cooper Flag tape, as we know. I mean, hopefully he'll be healthy and playing then. But the opening first and second round is it for me. I agree that it brings people in at a level that the average kind of non-sports fan doesn't get brought into any other thing. I think like annually, you're right. I think the World Cup, the Olympics would be on that list, but those are every 2 to 4 years. But yeah, I love it. I love hearing of a school that I've never heard of beating a school that I have heard of, and then looking at my bracket and be like, oh, I didn't have that.
So BYU Houston tonight, if they win, they'll advance to the Big 12 championship and maybe grab a top 3 seed. I've been saying, CK, and I don't know what your gig was back when Jimmer was at BYU. Were you still in college? Were you still in college then? Okay.
No. When Jimmer was in college, I was the high school sports writer for the Park Record in Park City, covering Park City High School, North Summit High School, South Summit High School. One Porter Larson, I think, was dunking the basketball back in the day. I think there are stories. We've talked about this before, but covered Porter's basketball and football exploits and covered Olympics. So that's what I was doing back then. I was very, very, very low on the totem pole.
Wait, Porter, what years were you in high school?
2013 was my last year there.
So were you on the beat when one young Porter Larson was catching touchdowns and dunking putbacks? Do you have any memories of this?
I know that Porter was on a pretty good team that I think won the football title in like 2011. Porter might have to correct me on this. Hayden Packard, great running back.
We actually didn't win football. We should have and got upset every year.
Okay.
Second place.
Okay.
Every
Second
time.
place.
But no, yeah.
San Juan.
CK was on the byline of like a game-winning touchdown I had against Richfield.
Nice.
In the playoffs, and then it was the basketball team. We had a title in like 2010.
Yeah,
and then
Trevor,
they won a
Trevor,
bunch.
Trevor Rydalch was on that team. Who else was on that team, Porter?
A bunch of Rydalches.
A bunch of Rydalches, as we know.
Get all the Rydalches. You're doing just fine.
But yeah, shout out to my Camas folks.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so you were not covering college basketball. You're covering high school ball at the time.
Correct.
But this, I think it's their best chance at something special since then. And, that team with Fredette probably, I don't know if they're Final Four worthy, but the whole Brandon Davies thing, he gets ratted out apparently down there, honor code violation, suspend him. And I think they went to the Sweet 16, if I remember correctly. But is this the beginning of something pretty special with A.J. DeBanter rolling into town next year? Like, it seems like BYU is really the talk of national college football pundits. You name it, college basketball pundits. You name it right now, they're talking about this run BYU is on, and then what they could have coming into, kind of coming into the season next year.
Well, with AJ coming in, I think you would need one of, if not multiple, current star players on the roster to decide to come back. Richie Saunders is a junior. Does he come back? What does his draft grade look like after this tournament? A Mission kid, so he's older. His window is going to shrink like all Mission kid windows do. Dallin Hall's a junior. Kev Ikeda's a junior now. I don't think the NBA is going to be busting down the door for all these guys, but maybe Richie you're going to lose guys like Traore and your guy Trevin Nell. But I think in order for BYU to keep this thing going and potentially be better, you can't necessarily start over from scratch with the number one player in the country with, guys that have been, role players, trying to think of this, Dawson Baker, looking
Nice
at the
pull.
roster.
Nice pull.
Cannon Catchings, who apparently is going to be a lottery pick, but I haven't seen him really play 1 minute this year, despite watching some BYU basketball games. Are we assuming that Igor Demon is gone?
Yeah, I think he's a lottery pick. I think he's a top 10 pick from everything I read. I think he's probably gone, but I don't know.
Well, yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is, if BYU and its very deep NIL donor base can convince Richie Saunders and Igor Demon to come back next year, along with AJ DeBonsa, then we can have a legit conversation about, these guys can potentially have a hell of a season. But I think it's really hard to be able to pull that off with the weight of pressure that's going to be on a kid like AJ DeBonsa. And I know they're bringing in another kid who's apparently really good, but focusing on what this year's team does really well. I mean, they shoot the ball like crazy, and I know in talk about basketball cliches. If you're a 3-point shooting team and your 3-point shot doesn't fall one day, you could be in a heap of trouble. So I'm fascinated to see how this BYU team does when they go up against either a really good team like they do against Houston tonight, or maybe a lower seed in the first round of the tournament and their 3-point shot isn't going down. Are they the type of team that can overcome that?
I have a philosophical question for you about college basketball coaching based off of some topics we've had on the show over the past couple of weeks. Now that Alex Jensen is high speed ahead of becoming the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. So when they fired Larry Krzyzkowiak, I heard from a few different alums on and off the show that they didn't love the way Larry handled the alumni. They didn't think he embraced the past. They didn't think he understood what Utah meant. Montana guy, what have you. And now after Craig has been let go, I've had a couple of guests, Josh Grant and others, talk about the same thing with Craig. Like, alumni tried to reach out. He didn't necessarily reciprocate anything. He wasn't open to those relationships or conversations. And I got to be honest, man, I don't think that's the job of a head coach in college basketball, to just appease the alumni, even an alumni base as rich in tradition and history as Utah basketball is. Like, you've got a job to do. And I don't think part of your job description is to answer every phone call you get from an alum to make sure they have front row seats or they can go observe practice. What is the job when it comes to college basketball and an alumni base that feels like they have not been, taken care of the way they believe they deserve to be?
Well, I mean, the alumni is always going to have a bone to pick with coaches that don't worship the ground that they walk on, because they believe that they have a direct say or impact on the success of the program. Presumably, if you're a deep-pocketed donor alumni, you're going to say, like, I help facilitate deals in the NIL era. If you're a former player, you're wondering, like, why isn't the red carpet rolled out for me? I don't know the ins and outs of it. I agree with you, but I also think, like, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably very small potatoes to be like, hey, Keith Van Horn, come talk to our team, like, on the anniversary of your putback against whoever the bleep that was. Like, I understand that you're not supposed to kowtow to, the ghosts of the past, but it's not hard to just maybe take, I don't know, 1 day a month, 1 day every 2 months to bring somebody back to talk to the team, or let them sit in, or just hear them out. I don't know. Like, the amount of money that these guys get paid, like, I know you're busy. I know you have a lot on your plate, but, like, you have to basically be willing to do whatever you can in order to make your program successful. For example, this is a hard tangent, but it's kind of local. Recently talked to Mark Matson, the Mad Dog, now coach at Cal basketball, was at UVU, played at Stanford, played with Kobe and Shaq, for a story about Cal basketball's travel in the ACC in the first year. Mark decided to take it upon himself to leave a bunch of open seats on their charter flights, their cross-country charter flights, for high-profile alumni and donors to get a sense of, like, how difficult this reality is in the ACC, because you open the door to people, you let them in, the odds are they're going to, your team is going to be humanized. They're going to be excited. I know it's not for everybody. I know Mark is a very unique dude, a very jovial, easygoing guy. But like that is an anecdote that I would like lean on, just be like, yeah, like it's worth trying. I don't see like how it could hurt, but every coach is different. And Larry was a pretty hard nosed guy, and the Craig thing was pretty surprising to me, because I always figured that he was the type of guy that maybe always talked about the Spectrum magic at Utah State, then the Huntsman magic at Utah. I always figured maybe he would be the type of guy that would want to lean on some people who had had success here. But listen, it's a difficult job. It's going to be a difficult job for Alex. I mean, I know there are people that are talking about, you're going to have to retain players in order to hit the ground running. Like, this roster was not good. Like, if we're talking about the dude who hit the portal today as like a building block, he averaged 6 points a game, man. Like, I think you gotta really like look at this thing with your rose-colored glasses, like smashed on the floor. Like, this is a rebuild, and it can happen either really fast or it could take some time. But the Utah men's basketball team just doesn't have a lot of good players, and they haven't for a long time.
All right, CK, before I set you loose, BYU playing Houston and RSL. Also playing a team from Houston. It has been since 2018 that RSL has been able to win in Houston. It's a 9-game winless run. We're talking U.S. Open Cup, Leagues Cup, MLS Cup playoffs, regular season. They can't win down there. It's odd. It's like Seattle can't win here. I don't fully understand it. But, obviously the start for the lads has not been great. My guy Forrester, your guy Piol, the two young nines with a lot of pressure on them. We wait every day to hear this announcement of this, mythical, maybe fictional number 9 that apparently is on the way. But what are you looking for from the lads tomorrow as they travel down to Houston? At least it's not August. At least it's not going to be 110 degrees.
Correct. Yeah. And that has generally been a thorn in the side of anybody going to Houston in basically July to September. But listen, RSL had their chances last week, and it's just a team that doesn't have a lot of confidence in itself right now. You can tell. Like, I know they're probably, I know your vibes guy Pablo was probably waxing poetic about, how they got to fix things, but you had 3 individual one-on-ones with the goalkeeper last week against San Diego, and you put everyone wide. You didn't put one in the goalie's like stomach. Like, that to me is evidence of a team that is currently low on talent where it matters in the attacking third, and B, low on self-belief in the attacking third. And that doesn't get you that far in this league anymore. So can they get rid of the Houston bug? Maybe. The Ben Olsen Houston Dynamo have had Pablo's number for a while. So interested to see what they do. I don't know if it's going to be Piol or your guy Forrester, but it came apart at the seams very quickly last week, and it shouldn't have been the case. And I just think this is a team that just needs more talent, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get usable high-end talent in-house in order to make a potential playoff run, because I'm bang this drum on your show until the end of time. Like, it's going to take anybody coming into this league a long time to acclimate, whether they come in April, May, June, July, or August. So you can't necessarily count on those guys because they're learning on the fly. Now, if you can acquire somebody in the league who can do it and is proven they can do it, I think that's a different story. But right now, I think RSL just has to figure out who they are, because clearly through the first month of the season, they've been all over the place.
All right, CK. Well, sincere apologies. That was immature to call you a name to start off the show. I was just depressed that my friend was not joining me in studio. So I take it back. You are not a coward. You are brave. You are strong. I see you. I hear you. Have a great weekend, okay?
I feel seen. Thank you.
The great Chris Kamrani. It's important, Porter, these days to let people know that you see them and you hear them.
I agree.
I see you and I hear you.
I can barely see you with the glare in the studio.
You don't. Now I'm having mental health issues.
It's the vision.
Take it back. Just say that you see me and you hear me.
I see you clearly.
Thank you. So you just sent me a piece. CK did cover a game that you played in.
Yeah, he was on the sideline for some 2A football action.
Well, if you ever want me to bring in my 6A championship ring so you can look at it, I'm happy to do that.
You should do so.
All right. We'll catch a quick break. We will bring in Paul Pugmire coming up on the other side. The Players' Championship. A lot of players call it the fifth major, going on down in Florida. And then Ken Pomeroy, live in studio, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock hour. BYU Houston tips off at 5. So we'll get you ready for that game. We'll talk some Utes and Alex Jensen, help you fill out your brackets. It's a drive on a Friday. It's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Ken Pomeroy live in studio today for an entire hour. For those of you that have been asked to fill out brackets with family or friends or at work and you're highly confused, well, Ken's the guy to walk you through it. And we'll get you ready for BYU Houston tonight. We'll talk some Utes with Alex Jensen, high speed ahead to take over the program. But our next guest joins us on a consistent basis to talk about the world of golf. We got the Players' Championship going on right now, TPC Sawgrass down in Florida. Paul Pugmire, happy Friday, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Spence. Happy Friday to you.
So, golf is hard. Golf is hard. And Tony Finau, I guess, is finding out that golf is hard today. Tony looks like he's not going to make the cut. It's been a rough couple of days for Tony down at this tournament. So is this just a matter of golf being hard? Is this a course that doesn't fit Tony's strengths? What do you make of what we've seen from Tony during the first couple of days of the Players?
Oh, I love your question because absolutely Tony has the game to win on this golf course. And I'll come back to that more in a minute. But the point here is that TPC, the stadium course at TPC in Ponte Vedra, Sawgrass, it is the course with as narrow a margin as there is in the game. A lot of different kinds of games can win on this course, and we see that over the history of whose name's on the trophy. For 50 years, it's some of the greatest players in the game. You've got Nicklaus more than once. You've got Tiger more than once. You've got Rory winning it. You've got Scheffler going back to back. But it's also names that wouldn't expect to be there, including Greg Parks, for crying out loud. Who's he? Well, he's a Players' champ. It is a course that allows a lot of different kinds of games to win. What it does not allow is any margin for error. Whatever kind of game you want to bring to this course, bring it. But you have to bring it with zero error. There's no margin. And so Tony's game totally can win on this course. But he has not played within his own margin of error this week. And as a result, he will have the weekend off.
You referenced last year with Scotty Scheffler. Scotty won everything last year. I just have the schedule up, and it's wild. He followed up a Players win with the Masters, and it's just like a ridiculous year for him. But let me ask you this, Paul. I often hear players refer to this tournament as the fifth major. Why?
Because the field is so good, because the course is one of the greatest tournament courses in the world, and because it is played the same year on each course, the same year on the same course, in the same way that the Masters is played on Augusta each year. And so we are able to compare players to players, years to years, and we can find trend lines within those and see how different kinds of games can win on this course. I agree that it is the fifth major. Are we going to say there's five majors? If we do, this is it.
Do you think we ever do that? Do you think we ever, I mean, the history of golf is something that as I've really become more familiar with the sport and have become mildly obsessed, I'll just say that, with the sport, I've always found it fascinating to talk to guys like you who have such a reverent respect for the history of the game. It's a little bit like baseball that way. You know, the hardcore baseball people never want to see baseball change. But do you think we ever see the world of golf on the PGA Tour embrace another major, or do you think it's always going to be the four?
That is a really great question, and I was going to rely on you today to solve that for us. But I do think this. What we define as majors clearly, certainly has changed over the years. When Bobby Jones was a player, the U.S. Amateur and the British Amateur were considered majors. It wasn't until Arnold Palmer designated the current Grand Slam in an interview with a reporter. Arnold Palmer just came up with this in the mid-'60s. The PGA, the Masters, the U.S. Open, what was then known as the British Open, the Open Championship. Palmer designated that. Palmer had, of course, more juice than anybody. It stuck, and it became, in the mid-'60s, and in the scale of golf not that long ago, that what we now currently call the four majors are designated as such. So it's entirely plausible to me that another evolutionary change will come in this designation, and that we start considering the majors as being four. or excuse me, 5. And if that were to happen, when that happens, there's no questions. The players is the next in line.
Speaking of the defending champ from a year ago, Scotty Scheffler, he's at 5 under, which is top 20. So he'll play through the weekend, and he carded a 69 and a 70. And he has been playing really good golf, certainly, but we're used to seeing him. And maybe it's unfair because oftentimes we'll do like, hey, did you see Tiger in 2000? Yeah, but don't do that because that's not real. And maybe Scotty had one of those years last year that we can't necessarily believe that it is his reality all the time. But is this just a matter? He had such a weird year with the arrest and then he cut his finger. Like, is he just getting healthy? I mean, do you think in a couple of months we're going to see him back on the top of most leaderboards every weekend?
There's no question that Scotty has the game, and his style of game is a game that lasts. Scotty plays smart shots. He doesn't give shots back to the course by playing stupid or trying to be a hero when he gets into trouble. He hits to the right part, the correct part of the greens consistently. No question that his game will continue, that his is a game that will last. No question that we will continue to see him on the top of leaderboards. His year last year was one for the ages. It was one of the top 5 years on tour ever. And nobody will replicate that year after year. But he will be a winner again this year. He likely will win more than once this year. It is just something that you can count on because of the nature of his game and the quality of his ball striking.
I mean, he's still the number 1 player in the world as far as the.
A lot.
Yeah. I have the standings up here. It's not like he's struggling. Here's a philosophical question for you. Okay, if because it seems like Keegan Bradley has been in contention all year long. If he doesn't qualify for the Ryder Cup team, does he put himself on the team?
I hope not. Being the Ryder Cup captain is a big, big, big job. I don't want him distracted. I don't want him thinking that he. I don't want him paying attention or thinking we should be paying attention to what he's doing as a player. Not when he's the captain. Being the captain is a great honor. He can make other Ryder Cup teams. This is his year to be captain. Now, it's not likely that Keegan's going to ask me for my opinion, but that's what I think. And even if he were to qualify, I think he goes, "Yep, dang straight, I qualified. I'm giving my spot to someone else. I'm going to be the captain." I hope he focuses on being the captain.
How do you think it would kind of play out across the landscape of pro golf if he does not qualify, yet puts himself on the team? Because we know how heartbroken he was that he did not get to go to Italy and how badly he wants to play in the tournament. And it's funny, Paul, like I'll interview a former player who's a coach, right? And I'm not talking about only golf. I'm talking about any sport. And every single person that I've interviewed that once upon a time played and is now coaching talks about how you'll never get the buzz of actually playing. Coaching never matches up to what it was like as a player. And so if you're Keegan Bradley and you feel like you got screwed last time around and you didn't go to Italy, I kind of could see him potentially taking that lane. If he does, how do you think that goes over with the rest of the community?
There's 2 communities that need to answer that question. The first is the other players, and I would have complete confidence in Keegan that he would talk to each of them individually and that they would all know, none would be surprised, and he would have their support before he did it. And so if the other players supported him in that I can see that happening, even though I would continue to disagree with it. But I can see that happening. The golf community at large, we are so hungry for a win on our soil, a win at Bethpage. We want the captain focusing on being the captain.
So the top 6 qualifiers right now, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, who won last week at Arnie's Place, my new favorite golf tournament. And then Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, before we end, we'll get there. So Bryson is at 5. Maverick McNeely has climbed into the top 6. And then it's Patrick Cantlay. Tony's at 8. Brian Harmon's at 9. That's Billy Horschel, Justin Thomas, Harris English Wyndham Clark, little known fact, I was mistaken for Wyndham Clark twice last weekend, which is a new thing for me. I thought it was rather wild as I was walking the course.
Let me add a couple to that because my wife mistakes you for Wyndham Clark as well. She's done that a couple times. So
oh, wow.
There you are.
Okay. All right. I guess that's a thing. I feel like I look like Wyndham Clark like I do any other innocuous white guy. But nonetheless, what does Tony have to do if Tony's not in the top 6, where generally speaking does he have to kind of exist in order to get that pick? Because I want to see Tony at Bethpage, man, for sure.
So do I. Top 10 in most circumstances can be counted on to get a captain's pick. Where you get the captain earning his stripes and being the captain is on picks number 11 and 12. And so what Tony needs to do to address your question is to stay in the top 10. After that, it gets to be the kind of decision that Keegan was right on the cusp, right on the bubble with, together with Justin Thomas last time around. And so being in the top 10, 99 times out of 100 is going to get Tony into the Ryder Cup this year.
Tell me a little bit more about Russell Henley. He leads the tour in money because he won, obviously, the event last week that was worth about $4 mil. He had that chip in for Eagle to hold off Colin. I don't know much about him, but obviously he's now a multi-time winner on tour. Tell me about Russell Henley, Paul.
He's a bulldog. He's a gritty, gutsy player. He doesn't get himself into contention very much, and that's why a lot of people don't know about him. But when he does get himself into contention, he does really well. And I like him as a Ryder Cup player because the Ryder Cup is an absolute sprint. It's not even a 100-yard dash. It's a 40-yard dash. It's a little compilation of 40-yard dashes. And things happen so fast in the Ryder Cup. And somebody with that kind of grit and that kind of bulldoggedness in a 40-yard dash can really be a good teammate and a good addition to your team. So if he's on his A game, which he is right now, he's a good Ryder Cup player.
Let's get back to the Players' Championship, and then we'll end with a little fun story time about my experience last week. So
Great.
when you look at where we're at now, Minwoo Lee at 11 under, as is Akshay Bhatia. Akshay won last year on tour. I think it was his first win. JJ Spawn at 10 under. And then Colin, who's had a hell of a year, and so is Rory. Rory and Colin are both at 9 under. Then you've got Lucas Glover. Hopefully he at least makes some money so his wife leaves him alone. Tommy Fleetwood also at 7 under par. So at this point, based off a very crowded, exciting leaderboard heading into the weekend, just give me some golfers you like as far as their chances to win the thing.
Well, first of all, you have to look at the very top of the leaderboard and players who have already done it, and that's Rory McIlroy. Obviously a multi-time major winner, plus he has already proved that he can win this event on this golf course. So you have to start that discussion with Rory McIlroy. Morikawa fits part of that as well. Fleetwood totally has to be taken seriously. I like Lucas Glover a lot. He is as good a ball striker as there is on the tour. Traditionally, he has been a wretched, horrible putter. Oh, gosh, I say wretched and horrible as though he putts like me. I mean horrible in comparison statistically to his colleagues who are visiting from Krypton. So among tour players, he has traditionally not been out of the bottom quartile of people in their putting statistics. He is putting well now. Combine that with his superlative ball striking, and he is one that I think has to be taken seriously. And I just want him to do well. It'd be so cool to see a 45-year-old guy win this thing. But really, it is Rory McIlroy is in the driver's seat at this point because he has proved that he can do this tournament on this course. One thing to keep in mind, we are halfway through this event. We are going into the weekend. Statistically, mathematically, you really are not going to have a shot at a trophy if you're more than 4 shots out. And so what that means is people in the top 10 right now at -7. -11 is leading, so at -7, they're T7. Statistically, they're the ones who have a shot to come home Sunday with a win.
All right, Paul, before I set you loose, I'll be joining your program tomorrow, which has always been a goal of mine in this career. You will not let you have never had me on. It's always hurt my feelings, so I'm excited. But I earned my way onto your show as a result of an experience I had last week. So I was an honorary observer along with my younger brother. He's the one that had the hookup at Bay Hill. And before I, real quick, tell you kind of some of my takeaways, what are the main things that you've noticed when you watch these dudes actually play? When you watch the pros, the best of the best, and last week we had a great field. When you watch them play, what stands out most about how they approach the thing?
What a great question, and I can't wait to hear your takes on all this because, look, you were inside the ropes, man. Inside the ropes, it's players, caddies, and Spence Checketts. So this is so cool that you were there. I can't wait to have you on the show tomorrow and go deep on it. But the thing that I noticed the most is, first of all, these players don't give shots away. Don't fall into the trap thinking that they're just making a ton of birdies all the time. They're not. Maybe the winner is that week. The winner might get on a birdie streak. But by and large, PGA Tour players play steady, don't give shots away, don't give shots back. They're lag putting, which is not sexy. It is nonetheless deeply, vitally important. Their lag putting is superlative. They always have no stress second putts. And their speed control is just superlative. And then my very favorite part, and this doesn't apply equally across the board, but they make a sound when they contact the ball that's just different. We're not hearing it when we're walking around Bonneville. The sound they make striking, especially the irons, is just beautiful.
Yeah,
Those
it's
are the things that jump out at me.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. So the Golf Channel, I did not know this at the time, but the Golf Channel basically laid down the law, and I think they named maybe 15 golfers where it's like no honorary observers are allowed around like Scotty or Rory or whatever, right? And so they put us with a group that was Nick Taylor and Sam Stevens.
Oh, cool.
Right, and Nick's a top 30 guy. He's the 27th ranked golfer in the world. You know, and I watched that 72-foot putt he hit to win the Canadian Championship last year on his own soil. That was like, so meeting him was just a thrill. And look, I'm a competitor, so I'm not on their level, but I understand their headspace, and so I was very respectful. Just kind of said hello, let them do their thing, and then Sam Stevens was the other golfer. Who I think, Paul, has a chance as he grows to be really good. Like, if you didn't know anything about Sam or Nick, to start off, you would have said Sam was the superior player. But Nick, to your point, just stuck with it. You know, he missed some putts, but he never really got rattled. For me, it was more like I'd stand with like as an honorary observer, it's cool because you're inside the ropes as you referenced. They actually announced us, which was awkward. We got a round of applause, which was weird. But we get to stand behind them for every shot. And so what I tried to do is, okay, if you were taking this shot, if you were hitting this shot, what would you do? And, you know, at times, okay, you do the same thing they did. That's the line you take or whatever. But the angles that they see that I never considered, that's what was the most wild to me. Like they always have their next shot in mind when they're getting ready to take this shot. Does that make sense?
Oh, I really appreciate you making that observation. It not only makes sense, it is an absolute given. And here's I'm going to see you and raise you. They're thinking 2 or 3 shots down the road. But look, it should be held self-evident that, yes, every shot you hit sets up the next shot, right? This actually goes back to, and you know, you were at Bay Hill, one of the great golf courses, not in the absolute upper echelon, but close. But on a course like Sawgrass, very similar to Augusta, you have to plan the hole from the green backward, and actually from the putt backward, and think, okay, I need to be, for today's pin placement, which you're considering before you tee off, for this pin placement, I need to have a lag putt from this part of the green. In order to get to this part of the green, I need to be on this part of the fairway. In order to get to this part of the fairway, I need to hit this tee shot. That kind of thought process is what they're going to. So they're thinking 2 or 3 shots ahead when they're planning on. But absolutely, every shot you hit sets up what comes next, and they always are thinking that.
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, and then on two separate occasions in the gallery, one was a woman asking her husband, "Why is Wyndham Clark an honorary observer?" And the other was like a younger. And look, I did not, and I don't even have I met your wife, Paul, before. I've met your wife.
I don't think so. We got to change that.
So I wonder why she has the Wyndham Clark take too as well, because I hadn't heard that before, and now I've heard it 4 times over the past week and a half.
Well, actually, she looks at Wyndham Clark and she says, "What's Spence Checketts doing there at the U.S. Open?"
There you go. There you go. As I said to both of the spectators, I wish I had his game, but I'm not Wyndham Clark. All right, Paul, what's coming up on what should be a historic version of your radio program tomorrow morning?
We will be at Winter Champs in St. George. Winter Champs kicks off the Utah Golf Association Championship season, and it will be a great show. We'll be at Copper Rock. We'll be celebrating Winter Champs. We're going to be talking with Kihei Akina, who is a member of the USGA's junior national team, and the junior national team has already started meeting and started practicing. Kihei's going to bring us up to date on that, and I am so looking forward to having you on the show and going deep on your experience at the Arnold Palmer and what it's like walking Bay Hill inside the ropes.
Wait, you're in St. George? No wonder you're in a good mood. It's snowing in 30 here, Paul.
I know. It's just so annoying, isn't it?
All right, my friend. Thanks for the time. We'll chat tomorrow, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, our guy Paul Pugmire. I'll be on his show tomorrow, Utah Golf Radio. It's brought to you by our friends at You Went to Golf. Time for our PGA Tour update. Stop by one of the 5 You Went to Golf locations or visit worldwidegolfshops.com for deals on Titleist Pro V1X, Ping drivers, TaylorMade QI35 Woods, and the latest Callaway AI 10-time Smart Face Club. It is the Players' Championship. A lot of people call it the 5th major. And as of now, Minwoo Lee is your leader. He's in the clubhouse at 11 under par, as is Akshay Bhatia. J.J. Spahn right behind at 10 under par. Then it's Colin Morikawa, Rory McIlroy, and Alex Smalley at 9 under. Let's get you some notables. Tommy Fleetwood finds himself at 7 under, as does Lucas Glover. Billy Horschel at 6 under par, so is Will Zalatoris. Scotty Scheffler, number 1 golfer in the world, hanging in at 5 under par, as is Patrick Cantlay and Ricky Fowler. Good to see Ricky on the leaderboard. Justin Thomas, JT at 4 under. He finds himself there with Cam Young. Not a great showing for our guy Tony Finau, who will miss the cut and had 2 really rough rounds. I'm still scrolling to find Tony. He finished near the bottom. Yeah, there he is. Tied for 130th, 7 over par. But so is Matt Fitzpatrick and Max Homa. Golf is hard. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Ken Pomeroy, for those of you that have been asked to fill out brackets, stay tuned for the next hour. We'll get you ready. We'll do some college hoop with Ken live in studio coming up on a Friday drive right here on ESPN 700. All right, I've got some good news because on this radio show, we're all about serving the people. We're all about taking care of the people. And it is March, mid-March at that, which means the madness of March is upon us. So chances are you have been asked to fill out a bracket. Family, friends, what have you, at work. And chances are you're highly confused because you may not watch a lot of college basketball. Well, our next guest is here to serve. Ken Pomeroy, KenPom.com. How many requests this time of year do you get from friends, family, whoever, to help them fill out their brackets?
I get a few, but I think, over the years, my friends and family have enough experience knowing what the answer is going to be, and that's usually just look at my website.
That's what you say even to the friends and family, huh?
Yeah, more or less.
Hey,
I mean, my website is my bracket, right? That's basically it. I usually don't fill out a bracket. I won't say I never fill out a bracket, but rarely fill out brackets because my website is my bracket. Like, ultimately, my reputation is staked on what my website says.
Fair enough. Are you ever tempted to try to win one of the – because there are several places you can go to win a grip of money if you win or if you get a bracket completely correct, which will probably never happen if we're honest. Right. You can walk away with 7 figures. You're never tempted at that?
I will occasionally slip a bracket in like the ESPN contest, just on the 1 in 800 million shot that I do well enough in there to get some decent publicity out of it. But yeah, mostly it's a waste of time to do that.
It is. And one more question here, just for our listeners to understand, for a guy who does this the way you do it, intensely, with detail, going over all this, how would you articulate just how impossible it is to predict this tournament?
Right. Yeah. It's a single elimination event. So one bad game and everything falls apart. Just in addition, the 3-point shot obviously becoming bigger factor over recent years just creates more variance in the games. And so there's just tons, like the variation. I mean, not to be too nerdy about it, but like the variation in human performance is pretty large here. And so many players in this tournament are very similar, and it can play the game at a good level, and on any given night can play it at a great level or play it at a bad level. And it's pretty random when those performances show up. So that's kind of what makes this tournament just impossible to predict with any sort of certainty.
For sure. All right, we've got a big one tonight with BYU and Houston. But before we get there, since you and I last spoke, it became official that Alex Jensen is taking the head coaching job for the Utes. He's the 17th head coach in men's basketball history up at the University of Utah. It feels like, Ken, this hire has been celebrated pretty intensely across the community. Every guest I've had on feels like this is the guy. I don't know how familiar you are with him as a person or a coach, but I know you're somewhat familiar. So what's your reaction to this direction, and what would you say to Ute fans about how you think he'll do?
Yeah, so it's always hard to kind of forecast this stuff. I mean, I'll take a more pragmatic approach here. Obviously, we talk about Craig Smith when he was hired. I mean, he was seemingly obviously the right hire, and I think in the end, like, he overachieved with the talent he had. He just never really had the talent to compete at the top of the conference. So I don't know how it's going to work out for Alex Jensen. It's obviously the buzz factor is high here. I rank a lot of things on my website, Spence, and one of the things I rank is this, like, the status of a program, and the Utes are like in the 60s somewhere in that ranking. So it's actually a good way to kind of figure out, like, hey, what kind of head coach could they be in the market for? The teams around them, if I recall, one of them was Vanderbilt, who last year hired the head coach from James Madison. One was Colorado. Tad Boyle came from Northern Colorado. Seton Hall was another one. Shaheen Holloway came from St. Peter. So that's the level of program you'd have to go to get a head coach. And there's obviously nobody on that level right now that would generate the buzz that Alex Jensen would generate. So from that standpoint, you can understand the hire. You can understand the timing, getting an early jump on the transfer portal. A bunch of team seasons have already ended. So even though the transfer portal is not technically open, rosters are already kind of taking shape behind the scenes. So all those factors kind of pointed towards this making sense. I'm a little leery of the idea of Utah focusing just on Utah men, for the hire, right? Like, that's something that you normally reserve for Duke and Carolina. So that gives me, a little bit of pause. But as I said, when you kind of add up, like, what would have been available, they could have looked at a guy like Ben McCollum from Drake or something like that. But he's going to end up probably at Iowa. Iowa has an opening now. Nico Medved at Colorado State maybe was an option. But again, those guys are not going to drive the attention or maybe the dollars from the donors like Alex Jensen would.
So let me ask a follow-up here. You reference your ranking, is it like the overall health of the program type thing? And what goes into your program ranking? So just for our listeners that they may have missed it, go to kenpom.com and you'll see the rankings of the teams that are playing this year, but you also do a ranking of just like the overall state of the program. What goes into that? And you said Utah's kind of in the 60s.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up so I could be more precise here. So Utah's 63. So Vanderbilt 62, San Diego State 64. Kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. So anyway, what goes into it? Overall performance, long-term performance. So I've, 29 years of data. So all of that data goes in there. So kind of just an average over the long term, really putting more emphasis on kind of the ceiling of the program. That goes in there in addition to the conference membership that they're in. So when Utah joined the Big 12, they got a little bit of a bump for that. From a basketball standpoint, obviously, we're just talking about basketball here. That goes into it. And you average all that together, and also recruiting, by the way, goes into it. So a team that's generally doing well on the recruiting trail also gets a little bit of a bump. So that's the idea behind it.
So you referenced the hesitancy or being a little bit weary of just going all in on Utah, man, right? But it does appear that conversations are happening with Andre Miller, who's a G League head coach now in Grand Rapids. My guess is he badly wants to move out of Grand Rapids. That's just me. And putting him next to Alex, for me, Ken, as a Gen Xer, fan of Utah basketball in the 90s, that's some cool cachet. That gives you some cool credibility. But that's just me. So if it is Andre next to Alex, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think once you have the head coach, like the staff can be, if he wants to go with Utah guys, that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. Obviously Andre will generate some buzz as well. Unfortunately, we can't turn the clock back to 1998 and have these guys suit up. They're going to have to bring in players, and that's always been the challenge. And they're going to need some resources to do that. And so that's going to be the question. Can these names generate the resources, and can those resources generate the talent? I don't know how long the honeymoon period is for these guys, but you can't expect it to be very long in the way college athletics is currently being run.
Ty Detmer got run out of town as BYU's OC. He won a freaking Heisman Trophy in Provo. Like, the honeymoon period in college athletics, it does not last very long. College basketball may be a little bit different than college football, but if Ty Detmer can't make it work for a fan base in Provo, I don't care if you resurrect Rick and put Keith Van Horn as his assistant. Alex is going to have to win, and he's going to have to show that he's on the right track pretty quickly. Yeah, the Detmer, that's a good call there, because you do feel like, that hire was. I remember that hire, and it was like the line where, obviously he's going to be a great offensive coordinator because he was a great quarterback, exactly, right? And that's actually not how it works. And so he was kind of hired for the buzz, and it didn't work out. Alex has, he has a history of coaching at the college level and also coaching at the NBA level. So just based on resume, like, you'd think he's capable of handling the job, and obviously coming back to a place that he's so familiar with. You'd think it would work out, but these things are extremely hard to predict. And like I said, with Craig Smith, that was obviously the right hire at the time, and it wasn't a flaming disaster by any means, but it obviously didn't work out the way people had hoped. What do you think? I'm asking you to pontificate on the impossible. What do you think's next for Craig? He's still young, and I've taken some flack. Josh Grant on the show yesterday said I'm too nice because I think Craig's a good coach. I don't know. Like, I still think the guy can coach. I don't think he just forgot how to coach basketball. But what do you think's next for Craig? Right. Yeah. I think he's still got a future as a head coach. Like I said, I think he did a good job with the talent that he had. He just didn't have the talent, and so, maybe coaching at a power conference level. He's not obviously going to get a head coach, I think, at a power conference job right now. He's going to have to take a step back. But I think there's still possibilities for him to be a head coach. If he maybe this year, but probably taking this year off and going to a lower level. It seems like his cup of tea anyway. That's where he had a lot of success, and that's where the competition for resources is less important. So it seemed to make maybe be more in his comfort zone to drop down a level. I heard Fran Fraschilla last night say something along the lines of coaching NBA basketball is speaking Spanish and coaching college basketball is speaking Portuguese, or whatever. He used that analogy, whatever it was. So Alex has never been a head coach in college. He was a head coach in the G League. what are the main differences? What do you think he has to overcome as far as his longtime stint as a pro coach now taking over a college program?
Right. I think at the college level, there's a little more skill development for sure. There's also just a little more, not that Alex necessarily needs to get involved in this, but there's just a little more, I don't know what the right word is. Coddling is not maybe the right word, but you do have to be, these are not, even though these players are getting paid, they're not really professionals in the same sense that NBA players are. There's certainly more practice involved over the course of the season. There's just more team development during the season in a college season than in an NBA season, I would say. And so that's, I'm sure Alex has some of those skills. Like, it's not like you said, it's not a huge difference going from NBA to college, but obviously the talent level is going to drop. There may be a little more frustration with guys trying to understand concepts. You may have to dumb things down a little bit more in college than you do in the NBA. So just those kind of adjustments are going to be the things that probably Alex needs to be aware of.
So Tim McMahon hopped on, was that this week? Yeah, it was, because he covers the Mavericks for ESPN. And asking about Alex, he said Alex will finish off the season with the Mavs. And as a result of Nico deciding to go full Nico, the season will end prior to the playoffs. Of course, they've had a grip of injuries. They traded Luka. It's still weird to me that they did that. But he also reported that the Mavs ownership had given Alex complete permission and carte blanche to go do what he had to do. So we were told he was at the Big 12 tournament where he met with some of the coaches and players. It's got to be an awkward thing if you're Josh Eilert welcoming in the guy who's taken over. I don't think Josh was ever in the running for the job anyway. But, of course, there are some players that have the chance to come back that do have some talent. It was announced about 2 hours ago Jake Wallin is entering the transfer portal. There's Ezra Asar, who is a junior. Coach Eilert apparently let Keanu Dawes a little bit more than Craig did because it played him a lot of minutes. In 3 of the 5 games that Josh coached, Keanu had a double-double. If you go down the list, there's Mira Little, who had a great game against Brigham Young. There's the Shrabjamps kid, and then there's the aforementioned Jake Wallin. Any of those players you think catching Alex's eye as far as him trying to get talent back, or do you think he wants a clean slate?
Yeah, I mean, none of those guys are obvious studs. They're gonna play a role for your team. So I think it's he's gonna take it on a case by case basis. Cleaning house wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We've seen teams do that way more frequently the last 2 or 3 years, and occasionally have success. We obviously have seen some success up the road last year in terms of Utah State's different level, but we've seen success at Arkansas this year where they completely cleaned house. So it is possible to have success, but I don't think success in year one is necessarily the measuring stick here. And yeah, I mean, Alex is going to he's naturally going to want his own guys that fit his own idea of how to play the game. And so I don't think he'd mind having a couple of those guys back, but he is going to want to, I think, mostly clean the slate and go out and see what's out there. Because there's obviously, we know how the way things work now. There's going to be many options out there for talented guys to come in here. And you're not going to get the cream of the crop, but you can build a competent team, just through the transfer portal right now. A
lot of people give Alex a lot of credit for working with Gobert, right? Working with Rudy. And, Dennis Lindsay on my show, I don't think he loves that I retell the story, but Dennis Lindsay on my show said the following about Rudy. He said at the NBA draft combine, they treated Rudy like he was a circus freak. They didn't know what to do with him, right? And then I can remember watching Gobert as a rookie. I'm like, he doesn't have a shot. He can't even run up and down the floor. And then whatever clicked. They get rid of Cantor because they're like, he's ready to play. So sorry, Ennis. Good luck in your endeavors. And that's been an interesting ride. They start Gobert next to Favors. And Dennis on my show also said, we don't care if we score 72. We want to hold them to 68. They go all on this defensive approach. And then the rest is history. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a multi-time All-Star Defensive Player of the Year award winner. Of course, the bulk of the credit goes to the player. But what did you see as far as Alex helping out with that development?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly enhanced Alex's reputation. And that's, been his role, I think everywhere he's gone is that he's kind of a big man specialist, and certainly that kind of skill set can pay more dividends in the college game. I mean, there's more of a role for like a standard big man in the college game than there is at the pro level. So that may pay dividends. We'll have to see. There is more of a role for a standard big man. It's not the type of offense that would particularly excite me to watch, but but I don't think you worry too much about style points right now. Whatever you can do functionally to have a productive team out there, if that means having a guy who's planted in the post for 40 minutes, then go for it, because it can be successful at this level.
All right, before we catch a break, because I want to save the next segment to preview BYU Houston, which starts at 5 o'clock in just about 35 minutes. Let's set expectations, because you referenced, year one, winning at a high level. It's hard to do. Now, it's different currently because you can reset a roster during an off season in a way that you couldn't even 3 years ago. So there is the ability to utilize the portal. I don't know what the status is of any of the players that were rolling into play for Craig. I would imagine that they're going to, probably decommit and then figure out what the deal is. Maybe they give Alex a chance. So let's set expectations. Year one, Alex Jensen, head coach, Utah basketball. What does success look like next year, Ken?
What does success look like? I mean, I think upside 500 record in conference play, that would be achievable and also tremendous. I mean, I think you're just looking for competency in year one. You don't want bottom 4 in the conference. You want a team that has a chance to beat some of the top teams. I think we've talked about this before, but despite the ridicule of the black curtain or whatever, and the lack of fans sometimes at the Huntsman Center, there's still a really good home court advantage there. And so in teams like, we saw it this year, in teams like Kansas come in, you can beat them. And so I think that's the baseline right now for year one, is hey, be competitive against these really good teams, and maybe you steal a game or two. And if you go 500 in league play, that's pretty outstanding.
All right, coming up next, we will preview Houston and BYU. And for all of you degenerates that are young, we'll preview Utah State as well, because that doesn't start until 10. I will be fast asleep. I want to remind you guys you can celebrate St. Patrick's Day coming up tomorrow, which is March the 15th at Gracie's, with live music, giveaways, games, photo booths, and more right in the heart of Salt Lake City. Get details and RSVP right now at gracieslc.com. More with the great Ken Pomeroy live in studio coming up next on ESPN 700. Coming up in the 5 o'clock hour, we will debate Philip Seymour Hoffman's favorite movie. We're going to do a good 10 to 15 minutes on Philip Seymour Hoffman in the 5 o'clock hour. Do I have your permission as the producer of the show to do that?
I don't know if I'm able to go back on that at this point.
All right.
So.
No, you cannot.
It sounds like a plan.
And I will apologize to Chris Camarati for calling him a coward. I did not mean that. And Dave McMiniman was just on TV. He does not look like a Keebler elf. That was mean.
Dave McMiniman, Ben Solak was just on our big screen.
He was.
He didn't text me back this week either.
Yeah, he's big time now. Speaking of big time, Ken Pomeroy is live in studio for another big segment. Go to kenpom.com if you want to help filling out your brackets. I always appreciate Ken's time. All right, Ken, big game tonight. BYU has won 9 straight basketball games. Among those 9 wins are 4 ranked teams, 6 quad 1 wins. And it's the longest streak BYU has had over ranked opponents since 1950. They dumped truck Kansas and Provo. They beat Arizona McHale. They beat Iowa State twice, once on the road, once on a neutral floor. So before we get to tonight, what stands out most about the way Kevin and his staff have been able to get this thing ticking on such a high level?
Well, they've just been smoking offensively, seemingly unstoppable from that point of view. It's a great offense to watch. They, have a bunch of shooters out there. They should take a lot of threes. Took a ton of threes against Iowa State yesterday. 36 threes in that game to just 22 twos. So depending on the three-point shot, but when you make 50% of your threes, that's going to work out pretty nice. And that's kind of been the recipe for them for the most part. Take a bunch of threes, make a bunch of threes. There are nights where they don't make a bunch of threes, but they also shoot 59% on twos, which ranks 5th in the country. So it's just a, when you hired Kevin Young, we assumed we were getting like the analytic ideal of an offense, and a lot of times coaches don't deliver on their promises, at the press conference. But Kevin Young's delivered this year. I mean, their shot chart is get dunks and threes, basically. Those lobs to Kebakeda, and when that gets taken away, which is not often because you really cannot help off of shooters. So that play is available a frightening amount of time. But when it's not, they can, drive and kick to shooters. And if the shooters get closed out too aggressively, guys like Richie Saunders can put the ball on the floor and get to the rim themselves. So it's just it's a really difficult offense to stop.
So to start off, it didn't look great. They lose to Ole Miss. They got housed by Providence. Then they start out Big 12 play after beating Arizona State with 3 straight L's to Houston, Texas Tech, TCU. They lose to Utah here in Salt Lake. They had a really weird road loss to Cincinnati where they got smoked. Cincinnati was the last team to beat them. So is there something that Kevin has done schematically? Is there something he has done with his personnel, lineup changes, that just allowed this thing to click? Or did they just stay the course and finally these guys kind of figured it out?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing he's done, he's definitely stayed with this kind of expanded rotation. I mean, he really has stuck to his guns in some way. Like, you look, they've played the same starting lineup since really the 4th game of Big 12 play. So there hasn't been a whole lot of change in terms of the rotation or the lineups. Some guys maybe have fallen out of favor, and like Trey Stewart notably is like fallen in favor, which is kind of a fun story. We're talking last segment about guys, potentially staying through a coaching change. I mean, Trey Stewart was maybe not the profile of a guy you would have expected to stay through the coaching change because he obviously wasn't getting a lot of playing time last year, but stuck through it. And despite really not getting off the bench for the first half of the season, has become a real key contributor for them, especially on the defensive side of the basketball. So, but in generally, I think they've just leaned into their specialty. Like, this is not a great defensive team. They're going to give up some points, but they also know they have one of the best offenses in the country, and they're not going to shy away from that. They're not going to try to slow things down or put more emphasis on the defensive end. They're just going to keep doing what they do offensively, and ultimately that's been pretty effective.
So Mark Pope badly wanted Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall to follow him to Lexington, and Richie and Dallin both stay. Richie Saunders named the Big 12 Most Improved Player of the Year, and I've been blown away at his progression. And there's a lot to like about him as a pro, right? I mean, he's got good size for a wing. He has good elevation on his jumper, and he's really developed that three-point shot. And, I always look back to like that old Mike Myers skit on SNL, the Hyper Hypo, where he had to wear a helmet because he ate too much caffeine. Richie plays like a freak when it comes to his effort, and that's a compliment. He just is full speed all the time. But the game has also kind of come to him in a way that I'm not sure I saw coming. Do you think he's an NBA guy?
He's got a shot. He's in that kind of next group of guys that's certainly going to be in line for a two-way, and a bunch is going to depend on what he does in workouts and things like that. But certainly the skill set is there, the shot is there. As I said, his ability to put the ball on the floor is there. He's taken a bigger role in the offense this year, which was really key. I mean, he was a really good player last year, but he's just taken a little bit more of a role in the offense this year. So the progression's encouraging. Obviously, he's going to be a little bit on the older side, but we've seen, the NBA be a little more tolerant of that in recent years, and for good reason. Like, we've seen some guys jump into the league at 23 or 24 and make contributions. So yeah, sure, I do think he has a shot.
So BYU, some good fortune against Iowa State. They were without two of their three best players, and that was a high-quality basketball game. Iowa State shot the you-know-what out of it in the first half. BYU was able to hold on, stay the course. Richie makes a big shot. So some good fortune to have two of Iowa State's three best players on the sidelines. And tonight, Houston's best big, maybe by far, Juwan Roberts, apparently is not going to play. Let's start with that dynamic. What does that mean for tonight's game that Kelvin Sampson will be without Juwan Roberts?
Yeah, I mean, Juwan is like the spiritual leader of this team. Kelvin Sampson was quite emotional on his senior night. This is a guy that's been around the program for 5 years now, and obviously just bought into everything Kelvin Sampson does. The kind of loyalty that he's shown there is something that obviously is appreciated. So the guy's a great two-way player. Really, he's very physical in the post, and he's really developed some offensive skill this year that he hadn't shown in the past. So I don't know if he's the team's most valuable player, but there's certainly a case for it. So that will leave a hole for Houston. I mean, Houston's more than just Juwan Roberts. I mean, that's the whole thing with this team. They're not really a star-based team. They have just a bunch of guys that contribute. So it's not a killer for Houston, but it's obviously a little bit of a break here for BYU.
So these two teams played early on in the season. It was at Houston, and it was not close, 86-55. And I feel like every time I lock in on Houston, I feel bad for the other team. I felt very bad for Utah earlier this year. I think at one point Utah had 3 made field goals and 7 turnovers. So what does Houston do to cause so much chaos on defense, which is where they really shine? And with BYU's momentum and confidence, how do they at least keep this thing close down the stretch?
Right. So I guess the one thing we want to note about that first game, BYU has been held below a point per possession twice this year. And that was one of the games. That was easily their worst offensive game of the year. They didn't make their threes, and they also did not make their twos, which is probably the bigger story. I mean, BYU was 10 for 24 on 2-point shots. And so Houston's very active on the front line. They're not a tall team, but they're very long. They get deflections. They get blocks. They're very physical. They, get the 50-50 balls. They just give, that maximum effort all the time. They have talented players as well, but Kelvin Sampson's MO is, I think, really unique in terms of coaches, where he's recruiting, a certain type of player that can fit his defensive system, can switch, the guards can switch 1 to 4. So that makes things very tough, for opposing offenses, and for a team like BYU, where they're kind of hoping for, guys to help off of shooters. Houston doesn't necessarily need to do that because their players are so switchable.
That game, BYU-Houston, your starting lineup was Kenan Catchings, Richie Saunders, Keba Keita, Yegor Demon, and Dallin Hall. So a much different rotation. The leading scorer was Trevanello at 12. Nobody in the starting lineup had more than 10. I guess the way I'll ask the question is, BYU is obviously a much different team now than they were way back when they started Big 12 play early on and went to Houston and got housed. For BYU fans listening, what gives you the most hope that this can be a competitive game and maybe BYU can even pull off the upset?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously BYU's peaking right now. I mean, they're playing their best ball of the year, so that's one thing. As you mentioned, the rotation's a little bit different. I mean, Catchings is hurt, but even before he got hurt, he was kind of falling out of favor. Yegor, didn't even finish the game yesterday. You can just see Kevin Young start sort of relying on experience now, relying on the Dawson Bakers of the world and relegating Yegor Demin to the bench in key moments. Trey Stewart played 3 minutes in that game, and he's getting double-digit minutes now, is really kind of a defensive stopper. So I think all of those things play a role here, and just the fact, it was just such an outlier game. Even if Houston and BYU, they played that game on January 4th, they played that game, repeated it on January 5th. It wouldn't have been a 31-point blowout. It was just one of those games where, Houston was clicking on all cylinders. Houston went 16 for 34 on threes. That's the one thing that BYU does defensively. They really force opponents to take a lot of three-pointers, and you would think against Houston it actually would work pretty well. Houston does shoot the three ball well, but it's only like 2 or 3 guys that shoot it, and so if you can force some other guys to take some threes, then you'd think you'd do all right. It just so happened that those other guys that took threes that day, were on fire. And so I think that's something to watch for as well. Like if Houston takes 34 threes tonight, they're probably not making 16. They're probably making 11 or something like that, or 12, and that kind of will naturally make the game closer as well.
Does the Juwan Roberts injury change the way Kevin approaches this game? Because we have seen some games this year where BYU has been cold from the outside. And they've started out cold. They couldn't get it going, so they go to the Traore kid off the bench, who is a tremendously skilled offensive player, great footwork, finishes with both hands. You just look at Kelvin Sampson's roster, Juwan Roberts would be the guy to guard Traore, right? Like, the fact that he's not playing, does that change the way Kevin approaches this game tonight?
I don't know. There's such a short time to prepare here that there's only so much you can change. But I do like your point on Traore. He's just like, he's been, I think, my favorite BYU player here for the past few years. He's just super productive when he's out there, and yet he never quite gets a ton of playing time. And even this year, it's like, hey, this is going to be his year, and then Kebaketa comes in and ends up being the starter, and Traore's still coming off the bench. But like, you look at his numbers, and he's just like mega efficient. He makes 64% of his twos, and a great rebounder. And even though he's only 6'6", he's long, so he kind of plays bigger than that. So yeah, I don't know that we'll see Kevin change too much. I think we're still going to see that deep bench. Obviously, in this kind of situation where you're playing back-to-back to potentially back games, it's going to be imperative to give guys a few minutes and not run the stars out there, 35, 40 minutes. And it's, again, this, like Houston, it's not really a star-based team, so he isn't not really tempted to do that anyway.
The latest bracketology, Ken, has BYU as a 5 seed. If they win tonight, does that bump them up to a 4 seed?
You would hope so. Houston's pretty much locked in as a 1 right now. So you would think beating a 1 seed on a neutral site would move them up. There still are some brackets out there that have BYU as a 6. So I think if they win tonight, no necessarily guarantees that there'll be a 4. But you'd think lower than a 5 at that point. That would really help out tremendously. And I do want to give the disclaimer that the committee is kind of lazy this weekend, in the sense that they're working diligently to put together a bracket, but it's really complicated to put together a bracket, and they don't like making late changes. So I think beating Houston, they would be willing to accommodate BYU on a change there. But if BYU happens to win that game and play tomorrow and win, like, tomorrow's result probably doesn't factor into their seeding. So this is probably the last chance to make an impression on the committee.
Very interesting. I didn't plan on asking this, but I imagine you have some thoughts. What do you make of the approach that the committee takes to create this bracket?
How much time do we have here?
Hey, we got another hour and 15, Ken. Take an hour and 15 if you want.
Yeah. So I am in favor of not having a committee. I think we just need an objective rating system, which actually mostly exists at this point, and it's something on the committee's team sheets that they use, which is called wins above bubble, and it basically identifies how much a team accomplished during the season relative to what a bubble team would be expected to accomplish. So it gives you credit for wins, more difficult wins, etc., and gives you a bigger penalty for bad losses. And we should just go by that and call it good. We could see who's in right now. We could see what a team needs to do to get in. It would be fantastic. But instead, we still have a committee, and we don't know exactly what goes into making the bracket. That, to me, is wild, that you have a postseason system that is, the invitations are made in secret by criteria that we vaguely understand but are not definite. And I after it's all over, when we ask people from the committee, hey, why did you pick BYU here? Or why did you pick this team in? They give answers that are often contradictory from one year to the next.
Sounds like we're talking about college football on the program, quite frankly, today.
Yeah, basketball is in a little better state than football, I feel like. The metrics and whatever metrics they use in football are not publicized at all. And so I really don't understand what's going there, but the fans don't seem to care in football. But there seems to be a little bit more of a drive for this in basketball, certainly from the coaching standpoint. Like a lot of the metrics that are used, a lot of this, certainly my metrics that are used and others out there that are, widely available for the committee, they were really pushed to do that by some of the top coaches in the game here in the last 10 years. So that's really what's driven it in basketball. So there really is like a different kind of culture from that standpoint in basketball than there is in football.
So I felt like the team Mark had last year had a chance to win a couple games. I mean, nothing beyond that. They ran into Duchesne. Day Grant, if I remember correctly, kind of went off and had a good game. This team feels deeper. They feel a little bit more nuanced. I think there's more talent top to bottom. Based off of your experience with this tournament, what would you say about BYU chances to, I don't know, do something somewhat fun, I guess is how I'll put that.
Yeah. Can they get to the Final Four and end that dubious distinction of most tournament appearances without a Final Four? That would be pretty amazing. Not something you'd ever want to predict, from a team that's going to be a 4 or 5 seed. But, certainly, you think the team's more well-rounded. The offense seems like it's more explosive than last year. Although last year was really good. I mean, my recollection heading into the tournament last year was that they were going to just mow down Duquesne. They were like a double-digit favorite as a 6 seed, which is almost unheard of. And they themselves got mowed down, which is, we might be revising history a little bit to say that they weren't that great of a team, but certainly heading into the tournament, it felt like they could do some damage. And this year it feels the same way. Like it feels like they could do some damage. Certainly from the 4-5 line, there's a path there to the Sweet 16, or we eventually face a 1 seed. But you start out as 5, you play a 12, then you play a 4. Like those are going to be 2 winnable games. And the way this team is playing, obviously Iowa State was not at full strength yesterday, but the Iowa State team in Ames was at full strength, and BYU was able to handle them there. So things look pretty good. Like if you didn't know anything about the history of BYU basketball in the tournament, you would be on board with this team as making a deep run.
No doubt. All right, equal time here. We've got Boise State, New Mexico at 7:30. And then for our hardcore college basketball fans who will be making it a late night, the scheduled tip time for Utah State, Colorado State is 10 o'clock Mountain Time, but that depends if the first game actually finishes on time. If I had to guess, we're probably looking closer to 10:15, 10:20 for tip, Utah State, Colorado State. So just give me your best guess. Who wins these 2 games? Who do you think we see in the Mountain West Conference Final?
I'm glad you brought up the time, because that has been a sticking point this season. College basketball games have routinely gone over the 2-hour window and caused delays. Caused your favorite game to be shown on ESPN News or something. And so, 10 p.m. is going to be an optimistic starting time. But as far as who wins these games, I mean, these are, 4 very evenly matched teams. These would be some pretty fun matchups. New Mexico probably, a little bit of an edge here over Boise State. They've had the edge all season. And then, Aggies and CSU is going to be a really good one. CSU has closed the season so strong. I think they're just really under the radar nationally. Neat Clifford, who's their star player. Nobody's used the term poor man's Cooper Flag, Spence, but
Ooh.
I'm gonna throw that out there very unfairly to this guy. But he's number 10 right now in my Player of the Year ratings. Donovan Dent got Player of the Year from New Mexico in the Mountain West, but I really think that was like a mistake. Like Neat Clifford closed the season really strong and has had an outstanding year. 39% from 3, 58% from 2. High usage player. He's the guy to watch tonight. And, if Colorado State is going to win, it's probably going to be propelled by a big game from him.
Does Utah? I'm looking at bracketology. I don't see Utah State. If Utah State loses, wait. No, that's Utah Valley. If Utah State loses tonight, are they out? Do they have to at least get to the final of the tournament to make the NCAAs?
They're pretty safe. Yeah, it's hard to imagine. Like it would be one of the biggest shocks in bracket history if they did not get into the tournament, even with a loss tonight.
Okay, fair enough. Since I brought up our friends at Utah Valley, they got a shot to win the thing and be an AQ qualifier thing.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little Todd Phillips.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean Utah. We talk about Utah State all the time and them changing coaches and having success, but it's like Utah Valley's gone from, Mark Pope to Mark Madsen without missing a beat. And then, they hired Todd Phillips, and you might have thought, okay, they're going to take a step back. But they haven't. I mean, they were outstanding this year, 15-1 in the WAC. At the beginning of the year, nobody would have said anybody but Grand Canyon's winning that league, right? Like Grand Canyon, people thought maybe it was a fringe top 25 team. The Wolverines win the league by 2 games clear of Grand Canyon. So just an outstanding year there. And they do have a chance. I mean, Grand Canyon is still probably a slightly better team. I know, Utah Valley fans would probably bristle at that, but over the course of the season, it still looks like Grand Canyon maybe slightly better. But let's hope those two teams meet in the finals. They both play in the semis tonight. They'll both be, certainly Utah Valley, a very tough matchup against Seattle. But hopefully those two teams can match up in the final, and we can get a round 3 because each team won on the other's home court in the regular season.
Lenardi has Utah State in as a 10 seed in Lexington taking on Louisville. So found them. It was just down at the bottom. All right, Ken, let's move over here. Some big picture stuff. First of all, give me your thoughts. So Cooper Flagg sprained ankle. He will not play tonight against UNC. And John Shires said he's not sure what the status is the rest of the way. So for Jazz fans that are wondering, why is my team doing what it's doing? I've been encouraging them to watch Cooper Flagg. You may not have the ability. Watch Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. Rutgers is out. And now Butler's out, too. VJ Edgecombe is thought to be the number 4 prospect. I think there's some variance there. But what does that say, if anything, about where we're at with not Cooper, obviously, but Rutgers has 2 of the top 3 NBA players, and they can't make the tournament? I'm sure for folks that don't understand the nuance of the conversation, that seems very wild.
Right, and it's really, I think, more of a symptom of, in general, college basketball just getting older here, especially with the COVID year still playing a role. So it's just harder for freshmen to have an impact. So certainly at Rutgers, I mean, Dylan Harper had a great year, and actually, Ace Bailey had a really good year as well. I mean, they both were as advertised. They just had zero help on that team, and that ultimately led to their demise. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of see that across the country. And really, I mean, the last 5 to 10 years maybe, like, freshmen are not necessarily going to the best programs, Duke being a major exception this year. And obviously Calipari still has the touch with getting some good freshmen, but he hasn't been able to really parlay that into the deep tournament runs recently. But outside of that, yeah, you do see freshmen kind of like choosing, different unorthodox paths now in terms of especially those 2 guys going to Rutgers.
Now that we've had a season of watching Cooper Flagg, and of course, only time will tell if he participates in the NCAA tournament, he has a chance to become the first player in Duke history to lead Duke in points, rebounds, blocks, assists, and steals. All of the categories at Duke, where they've had a few decent players. So Jazz fans anxiously awaiting lottery night coming up, I think it's the first week of May, to hope that Lady Luck shines on us for the first time in Jazz history. If the Jazz are able to get number 1 overall and Cooper Flagg is in Salt Lake, what sort of player is he to you now that we've had a year of watching play college basketball?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find a weakness in his game, which is not to say he'll, like, show up in the NBA and be an all-star, but he just does almost every basketball skill really well. Like, most of the guys you see at his age and his offensive ability are defensive minuses, but he's actually a really good and conscientious defender that can have impact on that end. Offensively, he's kind of your prototypical like ball handling wing who has great size and good length. He's a solid shooter, made 37% of his threes this year. He's 83% from the line. So like the shooting stroke is probably no fluke. He makes good decisions, good reads with the ball. He's a really good player, and it seems like you look at his teammates, and they're all having like career years. And so I don't know if that means that Cooper makes those guys better, but that's certainly one conclusion you could draw. That just his presence really opens up things for his teammates, and that's obviously a feature you want on your team as well. So, Cooper Flagg's still gonna have to. When he gets to the NBA, he's still going to have to grow into being, an all-star level player, but he is going to be starting from a very high level at a very young age.
Yeah, he's 18. I mean, he reclassified. It's wild. You have Duke as the number 1 team in the Ken Pom ratings. How long do they need to survive Cooper? Like, can they survive with Cooper on the sidelines for a couple rounds, kind of keep the ship afloat before he gets back? Or is he like everything to them? I know they have other talented players on the team.
Right. Yeah, so I mean that mystery piece is he the guy that's making all these players better, or are they just really good? I mean, if they're just really good, then they can survive pretty easily without him. But if he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, then they're going to need him to come back pretty quick. What you're seeing like the betting markets right now, based on the spread today in the North Carolina game, like Duke's number one in my ratings right now, but without Cooper Flagg, they're probably like 5 or 6. So they're still really good. They still should be able to survive the first week of the tournament if they need to. Their margin for error will be less. It'll be less against Carolina today in a game that's about to tip in a few minutes. But they go from being, in my opinion, the obvious favorite to, in that next level behind Auburn, Houston, and maybe Florida.
Let me ask you, so BYU, Houston, it's tipping off here in a little bit. The winner of that game will play the winner of Arizona, Texas Tech. Okay, which is also tonight. How do you see that game going?
Yeah, we pretty much had chalk here, right, in the Big 12 tournament, and Texas Tech and Arizona are just the other two big boys in the league. Texas Tech in particular is a team I love because I think they were undervalued in the beginning of the season. Like my ratings really had them ranked pretty high in the preseason, and they've ultimately just had a really consistent year, mostly flying under the radar because people were not on them early in the season, but to go 15-5 in the Big 12 is really impressive, and it's going to be a really entertaining game with Arizona. It should be a high-scoring game, primarily because Arizona is the team that will make it high-scoring to some extent. They're an up-tempo team with great offense and maybe not as much interest on the defensive end, but a lot of talent on both sides of the ball and potential NBA players there. So even if you're not a college basketball nerd, there might be some reason for you to watch that game.
Lenardi has 8 Big 12 teams in. Does that jive with what you think we're going to see when the dust settles? 8 teams out of the Big 12 making it to the tournament?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It seems like we're pretty locked in on that. Like West Virginia might be the most precarious case right now, and the regular season obviously over with. But showing up as a 10 or 11 in brackets should mean that they're pretty safe. They may get sent to Dayton for the first 4, but yeah, it looks like we're looking at 8 Big 12 teams.
All right, before I set you loose, I know this won't be your favorite exercise. However, there are listeners out there that do have to fill out brackets, that have the task of filling out brackets. Their annoying uncle sent them an email and said, you're doing this, or someone at work is like, here's the deal. Chris Camarati, who joined us earlier, his wife is a school teacher. They're doing it at her elementary school. So things like that happen. So, look, you and I are of the same mind here. It is an impossible thing. It's an impossible task. It's an exercise in futility. You will not get this thing right. Once upon a time, we did a bracket challenge at an old job I had, and the office assistant won because she thought Tony Bennett was handsome and picked them to win the championship, and boom, she won the bracket. So just give a few KenPom.com, Ken Pomeroy pearls of wisdom for our listeners that are going to sit down and fill out a bracket. What would you say before I set you loose?
Well, I think one thing this year is don't get too hung up on conference affiliation. I mean, you may have heard that the SEC is maybe the best conference in the history of basketball, and that is probably true. But just because that's true doesn't mean their teams are going, you're going to have 4 SEC teams in the Final Four or something like that. Like, historically, the best conference in college basketball actually does not perform that well in the tournament, and we maybe should not put so much weight in that. Like, Auburn's awesome, Florida's awesome, Tennessee's awesome, but upsets are going to happen. And on the flip side of that, like, the ACC has veered towards, mid-major status, and outside of Duke, you just might think they have no contenders, but Clemson and Louisville will be in the field. North Carolina looks like they're trending that way, but obviously a win over Duke would certify that. But certainly with Clemson and Louisville, those are going to be 2 higher seeds, maybe a 4 and a 6 or something like that. And again, don't worry about them playing in the ACC. Like, those are 2 really good teams, and you shouldn't hesitate to pick them going far.
Where can everybody go find that good work, Ken?
It's KenPom.com, $24.95 for a 12-month subscription. So if you sign up now, you'll have all the data through the tournament and through almost the entire season next year.
Great to see you, my friend. Great time of year. We'll chat soon, okay?
All right, thanks, Spence.
The great Ken Pomeroy. Go to KenPom.com right now if you want to be smarter about college hoops. All right, 1 hour down. Excuse me. That would be bad. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Coming up next, we have some breaking news out of the NFL. Cooper Kupp has a new home. We'll tell you what it is, and we'll get you ready for the final hour of the show on a Friday right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time Friday afternoon. Happy Friday to you. Congratulations. You made it. It is weekend time. Your commute home on this chilly, cold, snowy, and rainy Friday afternoon in March starts right now. Program's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's my name. I host the show. That young man is Porter Larson, producing today on ESPN 700, 92 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by the 2025 Big 12 Gymnastics Championship. Watch the best of the best Saturday, March the 22nd at the Mavericks Center. Get your tickets today at maverickscenter.com. What a night we have ahead in the world of college basketball. We've got one of the best rivalries in all of sports going on right now with North Carolina and Duke. That is just tipping off in the ACC semifinal. Duke is playing without their star player, Cooper Flagg, who is sidelined with a sprained ankle. Brigham Young and Houston also just tipped off. Houston has a very early 5-0 lead in that game. BYU and Houston, the winner of that game, will advance on to play the winner of Arizona and Texas Tech, which takes place immediately after BYU and Houston at the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City, where Texas Tech is a slight favorite. BYU a 7.5-point underdog tonight against Houston. And a little good fortune for Brigham Young. They had some good fortune against Iowa State. They ran into the Cyclones without 2 of their top 3 players. And Houston's best big man is not playing tonight. His name is Jawan Roberts. He averages 11.6 boards. He's their best defensive big by far. And BYU playing Houston, and Houston shorthanded just like Iowa State. So hopefully BYU can take advantage of that. Advancing on to the Big 12 championship game, we'll kind of see how that goes down. Some breaking news just came down about 5 minutes ago. Cooper Kupp has found a home. It is not the Dallas Cowboys. And at this point, I'm not sure how many players want to play for the Dallas Cowboys based off the news cycle. But Cooper Kupp is joining the Seattle Seahawks. He'll be catching passes from Sam Darnold on a 3-year, $45 million deal. This answers a lot of questions as Cooper Kupp has been brought in to fill the void after they moved on from Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Cooper Kupp is from Yakima, Washington, about 140 miles southeast of Seattle, and then attended Eastern Washington before being drafted by the Rams in 2017. So Cooper Kupp stays in kind of that area in the same division. He's going to play for Seattle. That news just came down not too long ago. The Utah Jazz back in action tonight. They are taking on the Toronto Raptors at the Delta Center, starting at 7:30 Mountain Time. So fun night of NBA basketball, fun night of college basketball as well. It is the madness of March. We've had a really, really busy show today. Caught up with Dave McMiniman right out of the gates. Then Dave did a Sports Center hit in our studio, which is always wild. Paul Pugmire rolled by to talk a little Players Championship. It is the 5th major, as a lot of golfers like to refer to it as. And round 2, more or less in the books. Tony Finau did not make the cut. Our local boy had a rough couple of days. So did a little golf on a Friday afternoon. Ken Pomeroy for an entire hour of college basketball. Have you ever, not in our station tournament, where if you're working for the station, you go up against like 4 or 5 other guys. In all of your years filling out brackets, have you ever won like one of these massive big challenges, ever actually filled out a bracket that does anything?
I've had a couple of pretty decent brackets. I did the same thing in high school growing up, right? Before, maybe not before, but before it really got big as far as like the online, everyone enters on ESPN and CBS Sports. We did the fill them out, right? And I did a pool. My friends all gave me $5. We all put our brackets up in the classrooms, right, to see who did them and crossed them out. And I won a couple of those. Now, again, I went to school with like 40 people, so it's not a huge, impressive feat there. Won a couple of those, and then I did win a money bracket online a few years ago on like the ESPN one. Thank you, Ken Pomeroy. I definitely used that resource and had a pretty good little payday on one of those.
You know what I forgot to ask Ken? I have it in my notes too. Ken Pomeroy, who joined the program, well, he joins the program often during college basketball season, but it was about a month ago or so when before Utah, it was I think it was after Utah men's hoops had I think there was the win against K-State and Kansas when they won back-to-back games against the Kansas teams, and you kind of like started to open your mind to some possibilities about potentially, I don't know, maybe qualifying for the NCAA tournament if they continue to play well, which they did not. They lost to UCF, then they fired their coach. And I asked Ken point blank, like, realistic expectations for Utah men's basketball as far as how often they should be making the tournament. And I want to say he said once every 3 or 4 years. And I understand why he would say that. So if you go to kenpom.com, he ranks the programs as far as the overall state of the program, not just what's happening this year. And Utah basketball at 62, I think Ken said. Man, that feels so low based off of historical precedent. But I guess based off of the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, maybe he's not wrong. But if you're a Utah basketball fan, the standard you should have is to make the tournament every year or at least be in the mix and then miss out barely. Like, I can't imagine there are diehard Utah basketball fans that remember what it was like when this team was making the tournament every year that would just take, like, yeah, we'll take once every 3 or 4 years. But I guess if you haven't made it in 9 years, baby steps is the deal.
I guess when Ken Pomeroy is talking about brackets, you take that, you take those words more seriously than you might a Utah basketball fan, right? And listen, I'm not going to say it should be every 3 years. I think that's a little low, especially based on, as we've talked about, the history here at Utah. But it's kind of an honest assessment of where the program is, right? When they've been arguably good over the last decade, 2 decades, it's been Larry, that era. It was once every couple of years. It was once every 3 years. And yeah, they made a run. They got to a Sweet 16, but that was the reality of where this program is. Now, if I'm a fan, the standard should be you're competing for a tournament spot every year. If I'm a fan, the expectation, Spence, I'm going to say every other year you make it into the tournament. Because right now, it's not just about, in part of the historical perspective is that you were a part of the Mountain West, you were part of the WAC. You could go win that tournament, punch your ticket, and, you'd break a sweat, but it's not like you were having to go win the Big East back in the early 2000s. Now you're in the Big 12, Spence. And what that means to make the tournament is you probably have to be in the top half or better of the Big 12, and that's something that is not easy. So I'm going to say every other year you should be contending for a spot. You should be playing late into Big 12 tournament week, and you should be expecting to make a chance at a run at a NCAA tournament spot every other year. That's where I kind of feel like is reasonable from a fan perspective.
Early timeout from Kevin Young. Houston has jumped out to a 9-0 lead over BYU. Still, of course, plenty of time left. 15:37 left in the first, and BYU just called a timeout. So, fun college basketball action tonight. Fun NBA basketball tonight. So, should be an exciting night for those of you that love hoops. Those of you that love the madness of March. About my friends at Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So we'll use the Jazz game tonight as an example of how you operate on Prize Picks to show you just how easy it is. If you've ever wanted to get into the world of trying to win a little cash on sports, this is the best way to do it because you don't have to learn all these other crazy terms. All you do is pick more or less on 2-player stat projections. So, for instance, tonight, something like Walker Kessler, more or less than 2.5 blocks. R.J. Barrett, more or less than 3.5 3-point shots made. So it's that easy. And if you get it right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. However, they're giving you free money, so just go take that. Then try it and see if you like it. Download that Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700 when you play your first $5 bets, and you will get an additional $50 on the house. You don't even have to win that bet. They just give you $50. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. $50 on the house when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Is this from the Kenny Rogers Christmas album? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, Big Dave loved it. He still does.
You almost requested it today, so.
I want to say, is there a song on that album you looked up called Christmas in Kentucky? I think there's a song that Kenny Rogers sings called Christmas in Kentucky that was one of Big Dave's favorites. All right, well, it's not Christmas. It kind of feels like January outside. It's about 30 degrees. We got smack with snow last night. Maybe you had to shovel like I did. And the storm will continue throughout the course of tomorrow. Our mountains are getting smoked, which is good, for those of you who like to go up and ride as long as you can. Warm up a little bit Sunday and Monday, then kind of a chilly week next week. But it's March in Utah. You never know what's gonna happen. I've got to know, Porter, as a football fan, what it's like to hear a player that was with your organization for 11 years say that he had to leave your favorite football team because he knew that he was never going to win a Super Bowl.
Well, what have I been talking to you about with the Cowboys for, I don't know,
Jerry Jones,
the entire time I've been here?
Not happening.
It's a franchise who is serious about the business of football. They're really good at selling tickets and getting their jersey out to every sort of dealer nationwide. They're really good at remaining forefront of media coverage and television deals. And obviously Jerry has built a entertainment venue that rivals any in the world. But I mean, I just don't feel like they've been serious about winning football games, right? And that's really the entire story of the Jerry Jones Cowboys, outside of course, what was a dynasty early on that, don't know that Jerry had as much to do with it than a few select other folks. And, that's kind of where we're at. So at this point, I'm in the despair part of Cowboys fandom, where if they win one before I die, I'm going to have a really, really good weekend. And, if they don't, I'll die happy as well.
Yeah, they're going to win one before you die. You're a young person. Got a lot of years. Look,
it's been
Jerry's like, how old is Jerry Jones? All you need is for him to, that's not kind to say.
I know.
All you need is for him to figure out something else to do with his life, or else the team just being taken away from him because he may have given up his ghost.
Spence, I am 30 years old. Okay,
So
and that's
young.
not old. I know, it's not old. I'm not claiming to be a wise old man. But I was in literal diapers the last time they made a legitimate Super Bowl run. Now, if you ask me, a Cowboys fan, I think that they kind of punted on the Romo era a little too early. I think that Dez caught the football and they should have beat Green Bay in that one run. I think that was their last real run at a good team. But if you want to talk about Super Bowls, it was 1996. And, after 28 years of waiting, I'm just not going to get my hopes up.
Yeah,
You're
that's
right.
fair.
You're right. The odds are in my favor, but, I'll wait until that day.
Cooper Kupp is a Seahawk. 3-year deal for Cooper Kupp after being waived by the Rams. So there's your breaking NFL news on a Friday. All right, RSL tomorrow, a little jazz tonight. We'll see if BYU can make this one interesting after Houston got off to a great start. Let's take a break and say goodbye for the weekend, Porter. But before we do, what comes our way on a Monday show?
On a Monday edition of The Drive, Spence, we might be, depending on some technical figuring out, we might be live from the Huntsman Center leading up to Alex Jensen being introduced as Utah's men's basketball coach. Whether we're live from the Huntsman Center or not, we will carry that intro presser live as The Drive wraps up on Monday. So a lot of the show will be tuned towards that. Josh Furlong, of course, our Utes insider each and every Monday. Roxy Bernstein, who's been on the call for Big 12 tournament and otherwise, he'll join the program. Hoping to chat with Tony Parks a little bit as well, and we'll go from there. Still a few things in the works as we may be on site there, hoping for maybe a few special guests and some Utes-inclined guests up
All
there
right.
on the hill.
There you go. That'll be a fun Monday show. It's the official presser, as Porter mentioned, to introduce Alex Jensen as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. But we'll say goodnight. Special thank you today to Dave McMenamin, Chris Comrani, Paul Pugmire, and Ken Pomeroy. If you missed any of the sound, website is ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app. Take us on the go. It's how I listen to our station. That ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store, Google Play Store for free. Then check out our podcast page over the weekend if you have time. We have one. Would appreciate your support. It helps us out. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and leave us all the stars. If you like what we do, we would appreciate it. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a great weekend. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Talk to you on Monday right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.